hit subscribe. Subscribe to my guy, Uncle D. Tell him Big Bad sent you.
Spurling. I'm an attorney here in Houston, Texas. An advocate for black men, largely because I am a black man. I'm a black father. I have black sons. Hey man, I do what I do.
What's up, what's up, what's up? Welcome everybody, welcome to the broadcast. Big shout out to my man Mark. Freelance, thank you so much. It's great to have you guys back with me again. I certainly appreciate all the time and energy that you all spend hanging out with me. It's always a pleasure to have my folks in here chilling and relaxing and doing what we do. We like to learn and build here. This is what we do on this side of this side of YouTube. You understand what I'm saying? But family, welcome. My goodness. There's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot going on, and I appreciate you guys hanging out with me so that we can kind of sort through the issues that we're dealing with in the foundational Black American community, or the Black community at large. As I always say, it's an honor and pleasure to be here. It's something I've grown to really enjoy, and that is talking to you all. I kind of found my niche here on YouTube. As an advocate, as an attorney, I oftentimes take the tough positions that folks don't want to take. But nothing brings me more pleasure than speaking up on behalf of my people. Now again, I tell you guys all the time, I got great friends from all sorts of communities. Black, African, Arab, Latino, white folks. I got friends everywhere. But the bottom line is, when it comes down to it, I have to be on the side of my own people, just like everybody else is on the side of their own people. But either way, you guys, like I always tell you at this time, make sure you hit the like button as you come in, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I appreciate you guys helping me march towards 100,000. And like I say all the time, if you learn something, I should earn something. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and just dig straight into this. A lot of Black Africans show hostility towards Black Americans, and it feels like everyone has resentment towards Black Americans, even though we haven't done anything. We haven't caused anyone any harm. Somebody saying the volume is low. Is the volume low? You guys like me to turn up the volume? Who thinks the volume is low? Somebody saying the volume is low. Let me see if I can fix that. I don't want anybody to listen. This is why I talk for a little while before we get started. The volume is low. I don't know if the volume is low. I think the volume's all right. Somebody said that the volume's very low. Yeah, I think I got it. That should work. You guys should be able to hear me pretty clearly now. That should work out the volume right there. Did that help it out tremendously, or not at all? Okay, did it help out or not? Did we get it sorted out? I can hear somebody. I can hear now. I hear you. Damn, loud as hell. Damn. Turn my speed down. Yeah, I know. I thought I'd fix it. Yeah, I've been figuring this out, man. Somebody says much better. Yeah, I had to work on these technical. I had to get my technical skill set up. Shout out to my son who helped me work on these, figure these things out here. So so I can do a decent job at communicating. But anyway, let's get back to the work. As I said, it feels like, there's a lot of resentment directed towards Black Americans, even though we haven't done anything to anyone. We're trying to heal as a people and come together as a nation. And you got groups who just seem to come through and try to separate us and create division. And as a foundational Black American, we need to clearly define who we are. We need to separate our identity. We need to distinguish ourselves. We need to come together as a group. We need to celebrate ourselves and continue striving for greatness. And but the thing is, they try to make it seem like foundational Black Americans view Africans as inferior. And that's just not true. That's just not true at all. Generally, foundational Black Americans aren't even focused on what's going on in those countries. Many of the immigrants, they don't even realize we're not even thinking about them at all. Okay? They're the ones who want to come to our country. We're not trying to move to their countries, not in any significant numbers. And largely, we're unconcerned outside of a small group of foundational Black Americans who strongly promote Pan-Africanism. Most Black Americans simply don't focus on them. Okay, we don't. We notice that many African immigrants, we notice that they reject Black. Okay, they reject the Black identity until it benefits them socially or economically, and such as when there's government programs or corporate diversity quotas, and in the United States, Black Americans unified as Black rather than by tribe or nationality, because it was necessary for survival. And unity became part of our culture. And for a long time, most FBA treated Black immigrants as if they were the same as us. It wasn't until this more recent era of defining and separating identities that large-scale complaints from immigrants became more noticeable. So the broader point of many of my recent discussions on YouTube here is to show Black Americans that Black immigrants often don't get along with each other or even with their neighboring groups in their own regions. And the argument is that they haven't historically shared a unified collective vision, and sometimes, they bring their existing divisions and rivalries with them to our country. And many are focused primarily on advancing themselves and their families, rather than contributing to a broader Black society. And here's the thing. These folks, they divide themselves on tribal lines. They're highly competitive with one another. And they carry that competitiveness into their interactions with Black Americans. And this shows up in attempts to assert superiority or to try to seek financial success or compare themselves to us. And, that perception is why, Black Americans are saying, no, we're going to delineate. Now, let's just talk about some truth here. It was a white woman that coined the term Nigeria. That was in 1897. Her name was Flora Shaw. She was a white British journalist. And it was after the Berlin Conference, Britain took control of the land around Nigeria and officially created Nigeria in 1914. And the borders were drawn for British convenience. They were not based on shared language or culture or government, which forced the very different groups, the Hausa, the Fulani, the Yoruba, the Igbo, into one country. And these groups have different traditions, and power wasn't shared evenly, and it led to wars and conflicts that continue to this day. Now, many African immigrants have convinced themselves that Black Americans don't belong in this country. Okay, and that may sound odd, but they perceive us as though we're temporary, or as we're foreign, or as we can be deported. And that way of thinking shows their own insecurity about belonging. They assume we were immigrants just like them. They thought our presence here was recent or conditional, but our family lines are part of the foundation of this nation. Our ancestors built this country, fought in every wars, all the wars, worked the land, shed blood for its freedom, And so when someone who came here through modern immigration laws questions whether we belong, this isn't analysis, it's projection. And they're putting their own outsider status onto black people whose roots here go back to before the United States existed. Just because they're trying to figure out their place here doesn't mean we are. Mixing the two, mixing, this is a misunderstanding, okay? It's not a problem with our history. Now, this is why they call us Akata, okay? Have you guys heard that term before, Akata? Have you ever heard that term before, Akata? This is why they call us Akata, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I have a very interesting perception on it, and I think you all will find it very interesting once I finish having this conversation, okay? And I think you all are going to learn something. It's been right there the whole time, all right? It's been right there the whole time. Now, I want you to understand something. This word, Akata, is rooted in the false assumption that Black Americans are disconnected from land, culture, or origin. The word is used to suggest we're stray, or we're rootless, or without a true home. But that accusation only makes sense if someone ignores history. When people don't understand that Black Americans' lineage in this country stretches back centuries through slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, civil rights movement, and beyond, they mislabel us as culturally lost instead of historically grounded. The irony is that the insult depends on erasing the fact that our ancestors didn't immigrate here by choice. They were forced here, then they built the nation from the ground up. So when someone uses that term, it reveals more about their misunderstanding of American history than it does about Black Americans. Akata is a racist insult to formerly enslaved foundational Black Americans. If you don't believe me, you can search the term, and you will see Africans using it, Africans from the diaspora who use it to try to insult foundational Black Americans. And you can go all the way back to the early 2000s. We're not going to let these vicious slave-selling tethers, okay, reframe their own insult to us. The first time I heard it was in the movie with Wesley Snipes named Sugar Hill. It was in the late 1980s or early 90s, I believe, and I was watching it, and there was a scene where Wesley Snipes was in a restaurant with his brother, and there were some African drug dealers, and they were saying Akata in their own native language, and in Sugar Hill, they said it meant cotton picker, okay, in English. And that's when the brothers turned up, and they should have. And I didn't understand what they were saying or why they got beat up in the restaurant, but I understand now. Akata literally translates to homeless African bush cat, okay? And I want you all to, somebody type bush cat in the chat room. I want some bush cat. I want everybody who can type fast to type bush cat in the chat room. Bush cat. This is what it literally translates to. And it's the slang name for an African sorrel cat, okay? That's what this is. I'm going to show you a picture of the bush cat. I want y'all to see this bush cat. And some of you all, I'm not going to talk about bush cats, okay? But bush cat is what this is a bush cat right here. This is an African sorrel bush cat. This is what this is, a little cat hang out in the African bush, just being bushy, okay? All right, now some of y'all got some bush and some cats, and I don't want to talk about that, okay, because it's Sunday and this is the day of our Lord. But bottom line is this, okay, this is an African bush cat. This is a sorrel cat, okay? I don't want to hear any of you pervs out, ladies, okay? Take care of your bush cats. That's all I'm going to say, fellas. Leave them wild bush cats alone. Okay, this is a bush cat right here. Bush cat. Okay, y'all got it? That's a little bush cat with little ears up. Look like that bush cat need a little shave. To me. Okay, need to clip around the edges. Sticking up right there. Anyway, let's get back to the broadcast. I don't want y'all to get distracted, okay, with these bush cats. But anyway, it basically means homeless African bush cat, and that's from the Yoruba language. And and the term was created many years ago to actually mock Nigerians that had become British citizens. Okay, they spoke like British colonizers and they no longer fit into the Nigerian people's culture. And the Nigerians back home called them Nigerians. They call them bush cats. Okay, and here's the other thing. The Nigerians also call Nigerian-Americans Akata. And it's a derogatory term in the manner used. And Africans also refer to, and I'm talking about the Nigerians because I just told you, separate people. They refer to the Fulani people, who are people who actually migrated to the west coast of Africa, or they migrated to the west coast of Africa from the east coast of Africa. They're Muslim. They call them Fulani people. They call them AKATAs. So it was not something that was created to label foundational Black Americans. Foundational Black Americans are at home here in America. Okay? Now here's I want you to understand something. Africans in America are the ones seeking refuge. Okay? They're the ones who are lost in that sense. Okay? They're the ones who are not at home. They're the ones, they're the people without a country. They are the homeless ones. They are the wild bush cats getting deported from every damn where they go, even in Africa. Africa is their homeland. They're the ones away from home roaming around other people's countries. So by definition, as an African immigrant, they are the real AKATAs. Because see, this isn't their home. You understand? So now we can call them AKATAs instead of Africans. You see? That's a name. That's a name they understand, right? They call us Akata. Say, no, you're the one homeless. This is our home. You're the Akata. You're the bush cat. You are the wild bush cat from Nigeria or wherever you're from. Okay, so you are the bush cat, not me. I'm not a bush cat. Okay, you are the Akata. And this, you speak your language. You are the Akata. I am not. This is my home. I am not. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? So. You know, somebody type Uno reverse. Somebody type Uno reverse in the chat room. So the next time you see a Nigerian or all these people, they refer, say, no, I'm in America. This is my home. You're the bush cat. You are the bush cat. You are away from your home. You're roaming in my home. Okay. Africans in America or anywhere else outside of Africa are the real AKATAs. Now they're accusing us of being what they are. And everybody really just need to get to where they belong, right? So, you know, this is just projection. And no one projects better than people who, you know, have something to hide. So African immigrants are AKATAs, not foundational Black America. Africa is not our home. We're home here in America. Now that we've established that, okay, without doubt, foundational Black Americans are exactly what the words say, foundational. We're not an add-on to this country. We're not a recent chapter. We're not a footnote tucked in the margins of somebody else's chapter. Okay? That ain't us. Okay? That is not us at all. And we need to begin to establish that. Our blood, our labor, our intellect, our sacrifice are poured into the concrete of this nation. Before there was a Constitution, we were here. Before there was a White House, we were here. Before there was a standing army, we were here fighting in militias, building ports, farming land, preaching liberty, carrying intelligence, and dying on battlefields. And that's not symbolism, that's structure. And a structure without its foundation collapses. Now, here's where the contradiction shows up. Many people of African descent who immigrate here will try to tell us we don't belong. They'll try to question our identity. They'll say we're disconnected. They'll say we're not truly African. But when we bring up the slave trade, when we talk about how Africans participated in capturing and selling other Africans into European slavery, suddenly answer shifts. Now it's, oh, we weren't the same people. Now it's, oh, those were different tribes. And now it's they didn't see each other as the same. And that's the truth. They didn't. The Fulani weren't the Hausa weren't the Yoruba. They were distinct nations, distinct cultures, distinct identities, many of them forced into artificial borders, later by European powers at conferences where no African voices were present. And that fragmentation is historical reality. But here's the part that has to be understood clearly. When we were sold into slavery, we stopped being African. Any functional with any functional national sense. We didn't leave as immigrants. We didn't leave with flags and passports. We were stripped, we were renamed, we were scattered, we were forced to walk what's known as in West African oral history around the tree of forgetfulness, symbolically severed from language, tribe, memory, and lineage. The very people who now say we weren't the same are acknowledging that there was no unified African identity when we were taken. So you can't deny brotherhood and then demand it now when it's convenient. We became something else in that rapture. We became a new people forged in bondage on American soil. We built culture under oppression. We built family under auction blocks. We built faith under whips. We built music, language, resistance, and political philosophy under laws that said we were property. That ethnogenesis, big word, that ethnogenesis, that transformation took 400 years to produce a distinct, non-immigrant ethnic group, foundational Black Americans, not Africans in America. We're Americans who were forged here under conditions no immigrant experience. And here's the final truth. When they say, remember, we're all one, it's usually when they're seeking access to civil rights protections or to economic opportunity or to political leverage built by Black American struggle. But they don't come offering to take us home, do they? They don't come asking us to repatriate. They don't. They don't come restoring stolen lineage. They don't come to benefit from, or what they do come to do is benefit from the infrastructure our ancestors were forced to build here in this nation. Again, there's nothing wrong with legal immigration, but don't rewrite history in the process. We didn't leave Africa. Africa left us the moment we were sold. And in that violent separation, something new was born. That new people forged in revolution, tested in war, matured through civil rights struggle, are foundational to the United States. Not adjacent, not symbolic, foundational. Now, let's get a little deeper. And this is where people either understand it or pretend like they don't. What happened to us wasn't just slavery, it was ethnogenesis. Ethnogenesis is the process by which a new ethnic group is formed. It happens when different people under shared historical conditions develop a distinct identity, culture, collective memory, and that didn't exist before. It's not just about mixture. It's not just about DNA percentages. Oh, I got a little Indian, I got a little African, I'm from the Fulani, I'm Hausa, I'm Igbo, I got a little Irish in me. Nah, it's a creation of a new people forged through shared experiences, shared struggle, shared adaptation, and shared survival over time. That's exactly what happened to us here. Foundational Black Americans are not a preserved West African tribe living abroad. We're not Yoruba-Americans. We're not Igbo-Americans. We're not Fulani-Americans. Those tribal distinctions were shattered in the slave holds of ships and on auction blocks. People from different regions, languages, religions, and ethnic nations were deliberately mixed together so they couldn't unify against their enslavers. Then, over centuries, something new emerged. And that new didn't come from Africa alone. We're an amalgamation. We're African, we're European, we're Native American. Some of us are Asian. And that's documented in the record. That's documented in the DNA. That's documented in census polls, plantation records, migration patterns, war records. But here's the key point. We don't disavow any of those strands. We don't deny them, but they are part of our formation. And at the same time, we're none of them. We're not European. We're not Native American. We're not African in the national or tribal sense. We're definitely not Asian. We are a people forged in America under a specific 400-year historical process that created a distinct culture, language pattern, food ways, music, religious expression, political traditions, survival strategies, social norms, and a collective memory rooted in American soil. That's ethnogenesis. Just like Italians weren't always Italian until political consolidation created that identity, just like Nigerians weren't always Nigerian until colonial borders forced Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, and others into one state, just like many modern national identities formed through shared historical conditions. We formed here. We became foundational Black Americans. Our culture isn't imported. It's indigenous to this land. Spirituals, blues, jazz, gospel, hip hop, barbecue traditions, vernacular speech patterns, church traditions, civil rights philosophy, constitutional reinterpretation. That's not an African carryover. That's an American development. That's ours. And so when we say we're foundational Black Americans, we're not saying we're pure. We're saying we're distinct. And now we choose to delineate. And delineate simply means to define boundaries, to clarify who we are and who we are not. Ethnic groups do this. Nigerians delineate from Ghanaians. Yoruba delineate from Hausa. Italians delineate from French. Immigrant communities delineate from one another every day through language, marriage patterns, business networks, and political advocacy. So when we say delineation is in our best interest, we're not inventing something radical. We're doing what every other group does to preserve its identity, protect its political interest, and ensure its historical narrative isn't absorbed or erased. You delineate, you organize around your national identity, you advocate for your homeland, you prioritize your kin. We're simply doing the same for ours. Because ethnogenesis created us, history forged us, sacrifice cemented us, and foundation isn't something you apologize for. It's something you recognize, protect, and build upon. Now, here's the thing. I got a couple of videos I want to share with you guys. Not too much tonight. I'm gonna let the videos play, and then we're gonna get back to it. It's not a lot of videos. I don't know how long this broadcast is going to be, but I want to share a few things with you I found to be important. You guys, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I certainly would appreciate it if you would hit the like button at some point and show me that you like what I'm doing. And again, we are marching towards 100,000. I'm not sure how many people we have right now, but we're going to get there as long as you guys hang with me, okay? Can I get you guys a promise to hang with me? That's really all I need you to do. Let's start off with this right here. Y'all hit the number 1 button. We're talking about delineation, okay? Check this out. I'll be right back.
No, people are crazy. Let's just start there. It is an act of desperation to call yourself anything other than what you are. Why are you always looking to be called something else? We are a rich culture. We are a beautiful culture. And when you have a high cultural self-esteem, then you go anywhere in the world, and it is not reductive to be in proximity to anyone else. I never feel small in Nigeria. When I leave Nigeria, I even feel more full. You know what I'm saying? Because I can see so many similarities. I can embrace the Nigerian.
All right, so my thing is, who are we? You see, because I'm saying that I'm a Black American. I've never been to Nigeria. And, you know, we know who we are. We're not Nigerian. And so this young woman, basically, she's trying to make it seem like we're an offshoot of Africa somewhere. We've been here almost a half a millennia. We are our own people at this point.
National culture, but also all the ethnicities within it, for its each individual beauty. It makes me feel fuller. Do you understand? And when you have that high, just like cultural self-esteem, right? It just makes it so much easier. So I don't subscribe to this whole foundational Black American, the Hotep, the Sulan, the flag, all this. What's wrong with being African American? You know what I'm saying? You're trying to take the African out of it because you're anti-African, because you're xenophobic.
So again, what she's advocating for is a flat blackness. What I want you to do for me, ma'am, is I want you to convince the Fulani people that they're Igbo. I want you to convince the Hausa people that they're Yoruba. You do that, and then you can come over here and convince us that we're Nigerian or African. We're not Africans. We're of African descent. We all of us with good sense will acknowledge that, but we're not African. Now, speaking of which, let's go on over to Nigeria, because remember, these people like to get in our business. So at this point, I'm going to get in their business. Let's see what they're doing over there today.
We have Ijo people, we have ethnic people, we have Yorubas, we have Hausas, we have different nationalities. So we cannot make a constitution for ourselves from non-existent people. There is nobody called Nigerian. We are different nations that were brought together, tinkered together by the British colonialists. We want Nigeria to disintegrate. Nigeria is...
Now, this woman just said she wants us to be Nigerian, and this man is saying he wants Nigeria to disintegrate. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, let's analyze. Let's keep analyzing.
It's a false creation. It's not natural. It should disintegrate naturally, like Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and the former Soviet Republic.
I found his words ominous. When the eastern state of Biafra tried to break away 35 years ago, it led to civil war. 1 million people died.
You hear what he said? Now, I got another video I want to share with you. I want you to watch this white dude lose his mind and another white boy check him on it. Y'all hit the #1 button.
Is really American though?
Yeah.
What makes them?
So this is the white supremacist talking points, right? And they wasn't ready for this cat right here. I want you to listen with this one white fella right there with the brown and say, they know. And those of us who study and read know.
Are descendants of slaves really American though?
Yeah.
What makes them American? Because they've been here.
They've been here and they've fought in every single war since our country's founding. So yeah, I think people who shed blood, who fought for the soil of our land, regardless of the color of their skin, are more American than people who got here 2 years ago.
Most of that blood has been white blood.
You hear what he said? Basically, foundational Black Americans are more American than the people who got here a couple of generations ago. That even means those people who showed up at Ellis Island. It's the same thing I've been telling you. This is just the truth. Now, you're going to hear this fella say, well, you know, he's going to try to make an excuse. Say, well, you know, look at his face. He's disturbed. The idea that how dare you? This is supposed to be a white ethno state. This is for white men. And see, the facts just don't bear that out. So we'll let this continue playing.
Most of that blood has been white blood.
Sure, that doesn't change the fact that the individual...
He looks like he's getting pissed. He's like, you keep talking about these niggas.
Fair use.
Oh my God.
Excuse the language.
Or his
Bro look like he's so fucking pissed he said
change
that.
that fact. I mean, proportionally, black men are only 13% of the population. So yeah, I mean...
No, proportionally, black men are only 6% of the population. I want you to understand that. Black men are only 6% of the population, and back then, the total number of black people that were eligible to even serve who were free were about 2.5% of the population, but we were still overrepresented in the military or the Continental Army. But let's let this get. Look at it. He is hot as fish grease. Look at his man. Look at his eyes.
Absolutely. But there are brave black men in my state, in our state, who have gone to war not just in the global war on terror, but in Korea, in Vietnam, World War I, World War II, the Civil War. Their contributions matter just as much.
That's true, but predominantly that experience has been one reserved for people of European descent, and I think it's important for us to make that observation and not just count that out.
Well, I don't.
There's nothing wrong with that. You can make that observation, and we don't count it out. We appreciate you.
I mean, you can make the observation. It doesn't make it. I mean,
yeah, you can make the observation, but that doesn't erase the contribution that foundational Black Americans contributed to the founding of this country. Speaking of which, I have dug this up. This is an old Glenn Beck video. I'm not gonna let the whole thing play, but it serves a purpose. You guys check this out. Thank you, B. Hunter, for being the first person. Hold on, let me stop the broadcast. I wanna thank B. Hunter, the spot, for being the first person who learned something, because clearly, you know, nobody else learned anything, because B. Hunter's the first person to learn something. And I want to acknowledge you, sir. You were the real MVP here today. All right. Thank you for the 99 $1 super sticker. I guess that's all I'm worth. But, you know, it is what it is, baby. Let's keep listening.
Like the blacks are How did he win the Revolutionary War? Double spy. Why are we intentionally leaving others out?
You mean blacks?
There are black founders. Why would our schools leave all of this history out? I mean, this is some of
they leave it out because if they start talking about how black people were actually here at the founding of the country and helped found the country, then it would throw out this whole notion of this white ethno state. It would throw out the notion that Europeans are the sole reason that America existed and only black people that were here were slaves and they didn't do any thinking at all. And so it messes up the narrative. So that's why periodically what we have is people erasing our contribution as if we're just going to forget about it, as if there are no books. We read books, you know, we read books now. It's legal. We read. And there's YouTube and documentaries. So you can't hide stuff from us anymore. All my white supremacist friends, I know you're here looking. I know you're here looking. You didn't think you were going to catch these hands today. You thought it was just going to be me versus the Africans today. You thought you were going to see some more black on black conflict. Oh, no. This is all about you. This is about you, white people. Not all white people, but I'm talking about the white supremacists. So come on in. I want to make sure all my white supremacist friends, all my ethno-staters, I want you guys, you Nick Fuentes rejects, I want y'all to make sure you all come in and subscribe to the channel too. You can help me get some YouTube ad money. But let's continue listening.
The greatest American story that you've ever heard. Why would they do that? And it's everywhere. You just don't know where to look. If you take a look at the revolutionary paintings of revolutionary times, here it is. This is a Boston Tea Party. Bunch of white guys, and these people strangely looking like Indians, and they're not. But that's it. Not a lot of racial diversity. If you watch movies, one great movie. This is John Adams. You watch John Adams, and you don't see a lot of racial diversity. I'm currently watching Johnny Tremaine. This is. I love this movie. I remember this growing up. I was watching it with my kids just last night, and I noticed there are a couple of American Indians, but you don't see any African Americans unless they're slaves. They will show people as slaves, but that's it.
Fair use.
Now, I want to show you a painting of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Here's the Battle of Bunker Hill. Bunch of white guys, right?
Yep, that's what I see.
Unless you know where to look. Right here. That's Peter Salem. He was actually the hero of the battle. It doesn't look like he's a hero there. He looks like he's cowering behind the white guy with a sword.
You guys remember that name, Peter Salem? We're going to talk heavy about that tonight.
He was the hero of the battle. And he saved scores of American lives that day. Why don't we know this? Look here.
Because we are racist.
African American.
Because we're racist.
Row the boat across. You know what his name was? Prince Whipple. He fought alongside Washington during the Revolution. Take a look at this one. This painting of, this is the Marquis de Lafayette. If you look at this, you just think, oh yeah, and then he made his slave dress up like I don't know what. But that's what you would think, right?
Mm-hmm.
This guy is incredibly important. This guy may have won the Revolutionary War. James Armistead was...
Remember the name, James Armistead.
His name. How did he win the Revolutionary War? Double spy. I'm going to let David tell the story here in a minute, but basically the Brits thought that he was spying for them, but he was spying for General Washington. He'd give the Brits bad intel and reveal the good critical information to General Washington. Did you know this story?
No, most people don't. Okay, nobody's coming to that class. Okay, we're asleep during that class, sir. Go ahead.
Why?
Because we're racist as a country. You know this, Glenn. Stop playing. You know we're racist. We don't talk about what black people do. Cut it out, Glenn.
I'm so tired of people saying, well, it was just the white people, white people, white people. No. No. Why are we intentionally leaving others out?
Others? Somebody type others. He means black. That's the translate. Black. He means black.
There are black founders in history. If I ask the audience, when did America have its first African-American judge? What year would you say? Anybody? Take a guess. Judge.
Thank you, Selma Haywood. Thank you so much, baby. I appreciate that. I'm gonna give a shout out to all the super chats, lady. But let's keep listening.
1860s. Anybody? 1770. Amy, is that just a wild guess?
No, not. I wasn't sure exactly, but I think it's about
1770. Tell me.
1768. Wentworth Cheswell, New Hampshire, elected to office in New Hampshire. He was reelected for the next 49 years.
49 years.
Political positions. Really cool story about him is we all know that Paul Revere made his midnight ride. We also know he wasn't the only guy riding that night.
Right.
Another guy riding, Wentworth Cheswell, black and white.
Now, how is it possible? Did you know that we had an African-American ride to say the British are coming? The British are coming?
No, because we're racist. Glenn, you know we're racist. We don't want to teach little white kids this stuff. We just want to talk about slavery, and we fought the Civil War, and then Martin Luther King, and then that was it. That's all they want to talk about. They don't want to talk about this because this would undermine this fragile ego that white people have, that this is their country and they just founded, did it all by themselves, okay? That's like some kid who builds a sand castle on a beach with all his friends and then takes credit for himself. It was a team effort, but they don't want to talk about that. Let's continue.
Amy did. Amy did. Anybody else besides Amy know that? 2, 3. Okay, 3 people in the audience.
Now, the white guy with the sword is Thomas.
Again, I want you all to make sure that you acknowledge the fact that I'm being really quiet. I'm not interrupting. I'm not talking over the videos, right? I'm doing great. I feel. And so thank you all, for chastising me. You told me to be quiet. Don't yell at the TV. I'm not doing it. I'm doing exactly what you all told me to do. So I'm going to let you all keep yelling at the screen on YouTube. I'm going to let y'all keep doing it. But I'm being quiet because you all told me you don't want me talking over the video. So let's go ahead and continue.
Grosvenor. So you have Thomas Grosvenor and you have Peter Salem, black and white fighting side by side. But Peter is definitely the hero that day.
Peter.
1817, this painting is done. And all the way up until the 1980s, we knew that was Peter Salem, the hero of Bunker Hill. 1980s, the professors got together and said, oh, no, that's not Peter Salem. We think that's Grosvenor's slave is who that is. It's not Peter Salem. No, in the 80s, they changed that from Peter Salem to Grosvenor's slave, Asaba. And that's what they say, oh, no, it's not Peter, it's Asaba, Grosvenor, it's his slave. How come the guy who painted it and the guy who was there and the guy who saw it and painted what he saw had him as Peter Salem, and now we've all convinced, oh, no, it's a slave.
Now, this is a very important picture. Peter Salem is a very important figure. I want you to listen, and I'm going to give you the context when we're just getting rolling. I'm not going to have you here long, okay? We're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. But y'all keep lit. Peter Salem, remember these names. This man should be ranked right up there with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, okay? I want y'all to just pictures. Give me a minute. We're going to get it going.
One thing that I think is missing in America, and it is the key to America, has been the difference between individual rights and collective rights. And this man articulated that.
This guy right here, this is Lemuel Haynes. Lemuel Haynes is a soldier in the American Revolution. He's a black preacher. He's the first black preacher ordained in America that was a pastor of a white congregation in Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, several places.
A black professor in
black
a
preacher,
white,
that's right, in a white church.
Yeah, black minister.
Black minister in a white church in 4 different states. He was ordained in the Congregationalist denomination in 1785. He's the first black to receive a master's degree in America. He got that in 1804 from Middlebury College. So Lemuel Haynes, every year on Washington's birthday, he preached a special sermon about George Washington, his commander-in-chief, in all of his churches where he was. So we don't hear about Lemuel Haynes. This is Benjamin Banneker. I think he's the most brilliant scientist in American history. This guy, unbelievable what he did.
I think Benjamin Banneker is the most brilliant scientist in American history. Black man, okay?
He's the guy
more so than Franklin?
I would put Franklin and Banneker almost equal. Now, Franklin did a lot of inventions. This guy one time took a pocket watch. He taught himself how to read. He taught himself science. He wrote an almanac that 10 years ahead he was able to predict to the minute solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, 10 years before they happened. I mean, by watching the motion through a telescope, unbelievable what the guy did. He once took the back off a pocket watch, saw how it worked, went home, and carved a wooden clock with all the gears, mainspring, and it was accurate to within 1 minute a year. A wooden clock the guy did.
A wooden clock.
He's the guy who laid out Washington, D.C. He's the surveyor who did all that. He's a brilliant mathematician. Jefferson gave him...
Never knew this.
No. Jefferson gave him an example in France. Said, hey, you guys in France think that blacks are inferior? Here's Benjamin Banneker.
Okay, first, representatives, I asked, when did we have our first black Speaker of the House? When did we have the first Speaker of the House? 1789. When did we have our first black Speaker of the House? I bet most people would say never.
Never. Except it was right here. Joseph Hayne Rainey. Joseph Hayne Rainey in South Carolina.
Joseph Hayne Rainey.
The first black to preside over the House of Representatives. These are the first 7 blacks elected to Congress. You have here Senator Hiram Rhodes Rebels, the first black U.S. Senator elected. He was a minister of the gospel. He was a missionary. He worked with Frederick Douglass. He recruited 3 regiments of black soldiers in the Civil War, and he was a missionary to slaves in the South. You have here Benjamin Turner, Josiah Wall, DeLarge. This guy right here is really cool. Robert Brown Elliott is probably the most brilliant guy of that era. He actually took on the vice president of the Confederacy in a debate on the floor and just tore his head off. The racist Alexander Stephens. It was a great debate.
When did we turn? Were these guys proud Americans, or did they say...
They were proud Americans. They were proud Americans, Glenn.
This is the epitome of what we were just talking about. These were individual guys. Half of these guys taught themselves to read. Half of these guys were slaves. And 5 years later, they're sitting in Congress. And as slaves, it was a capital offense to learn to read. So these guys in 5 years, and I'll guarantee you read their speeches and records of Congress, you better have a dictionary and thesaurus in both hands because you want to understand the language that it is so brilliant what these guys did.
But were they there to say the white man is bad and the America is bad?
And these guys were, Richard Allen, let me go back here. Richard Allen had been in slavery. Richard Allen was in slavery and he held no bitterness at all. He says, God...
They concerned about that. They don't want you black people to be mad at them. Look, we're just doing our thing. We needed to get the country built. Okay? But anyway, you guys get the point. Big shout out to Dan Taylor, 9982. Thank you for the $199, man. Let's go ahead and get this broadcast going. I'm gonna make sure I acknowledge everybody again at the broadcast when we conclude. But man, I want to give a big. I wanted to stop the broadcast and give a big shout out to Dan, Money Man Dan. What's happening, Money Man Dan? Big shout out to you, family. Shout out to Selma Haywood and shout out to Council 4560 and behind it. Let's go ahead and get this thing cracking. Look, family, look, man, let me tell you something. All right, I want y'all to come in tight because we're going to learn a lot tonight. You understand me? I'm going to put it all in context for you. We are foundational black Americans, and we've been told that we were here at the foundation, but I'm going to give you names I'm going to give you information. See, we always begin by saying America was founded through a revolution, right? We say the colonies broke away from Britain and fought a war and won their independence, but that raises a deeper question. How did the colonies actually win the Revolutionary War? And who was here at the time? Shout out to Yaya's kids. I'm going to give a shout out to all y'all, but who was here at the time helping in the fight? Okay, independence didn't just happen because a few famous names signed a document. It happened because ordinary people picked up weapons, stood in militias, and endured years of war. And when we ask who was here, the answer is broader than many people were taught in school. The population of colonies wasn't made up of just one group of people. You had free black men, free black women, you had enslaved Africans, you had Native Americans, you had and European settlers were all present in 1775. So if the country was founded through a revolution, then everybody who helped fight that revolution is part of the founding story. And that's where the conversation really begins. Largely, what has happened is that over time there have been attempts to whitewash American history. Even now you have Donald Trump taking down statues and plaques and memorabilia, not just here in the United States, but over in France, related to the contribution of black soldiers and patriots who died overseas in World War II. And what he's doing is it's not new. It's an attempt to reestablish history so that it suits those notions of white supremacy and racism. It helps them support the notion that this was a white country meant for white people. And the truth is, it never was. It wouldn't even be a country without the contribution of black men and black women and the other people that were here. Now, zoom out of the colonial. I want you to zoom out and let's talk about the colonial population at the time, okay? The total population of the 13 colonies was roughly 2.5 million people. New England, okay? New England, the black population ranged from about 2 to 5%. New England is made up of the states we know now as Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. You know the little tiny corners in the upper right armpit of America, right? That most folk down south can't pick out if they wanted to. Now, the middle colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, it ranged roughly 8 to 15%, with New York City having a significant slavery number. Yeah, they had slaves in New York, okay? Now, in the southern states, the southern colonies, that would be Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina. Black populations were between 30 to 50%. And I mean, they literally matched the outnumbered, in South Carolina, enslaved people actually outnumbered white people. And of those approximately 450 to 500,000 were black, meaning that 18 to 20% of the total colonial population was black. That's 1 in 5 people. So of the 13 colonies, family, 1 in 5 people were black. Okay, are y'all with me on that? It's a large number. Isn't that a lot of people? That's a whole lot of folks, you see? 1 in 5. And those people didn't disappear. They were here at the founding of the country. Let me run that back to you. Because see, what that means is if you can trace your lineage back to that 2.5 million people, then or should I say if you can't, then you're not foundational. Specifically, you're not a black person that is foundational, and because you can't trace your lineage back to that. Okay, all right. Now, of the roughly 500,000 black people in those colonies in 1775, overwhelming majority was slaves. Again, as I said, it was 450 were enslaved and maybe 40 to 50,000 free black people. Okay, in the South, about 90% of the black people were enslaved. In the North, not so much. Okay. Now I'm going to talk to you guys about somebody named Wentworth Cheswell. Okay, and they mentioned it. Glenn Beck in his video mentioned it. He was a free black civic leader in Newmarket, New Hampshire. And he's one of the earliest examples of black Americans helping run the community during the Revolutionary era. So everybody wasn't a slave. He helped run the community, not just fighting in the war. He was the only child of Hope Still Cheswell, a free black man of mixed ancestry, who was a skilled housewife and carpenter, and a woman named Catherine Kinston Cheswell, a white woman. Okay, his family status mattered. He was born enslaved, which helped him move in spaces well, let me say, like, he wasn't born enslaved, and so he was able to move around where other black people couldn't. Okay, he was educated, he was at least well enough to become a teacher. He became a public official, and he studied at a place called Dummer Academy. Now it's called the Governor's Academy, and he did well there. Now, what makes Cheswell stand out is how early and how consistently his neighbors trusted him with power. Now, keep in mind, this is a black man, and this is 1768. He was elected to be the constable in Newmarket. Basically, he was the law enforcement. Okay. And after he served in public office almost every year for decades, he was the assessor, he was the auditor, he was justice of the peace. Basically, he was a local judge, a black man as a judge in 1768. A local, shout out to CD Stapp, a local news, New Hampshire paper summarized it plainly. After the 1768 election, he had served in local offices nearly his entire life until his death in 1817. And that means he wasn't just present in early America, he was part of the machinery of the local government while the country was being born. He was here at the foundation. And during the Revolutionary War, Creswell also helped with communications and organization, which is where the Midnight Ride idea came from. We've got solid evidence that he served as the town messenger. This was a busy man. This man was busy. Okay, he was busy. You understand me? He was everywhere. Okay, he was a town messenger for Newmarket, what they call the Committee of Safety. He was on the safety committee. Okay, safety. We need to be safe from these British invaders. Okay, and his job was carrying information to and from the provincial leadership in Exeter or Exeter. I can't say the name, but the town over. Okay, and he helped coordinate things with the Americans, and people say that he rode with Paul Revere, and Revere is tied to the December 1774 warning trip to Portsmouth about British ships headed towards Fort William and Mary, which helps explain why people connect these messenger stories. But the strongest documented point is that Wentworth Cheswell carried urgent messages for New Hampshire's revolutionary network either way. And the big picture doesn't change. Cheswell shows that black Americans weren't only fighting with muskets, they were warning towns, moving intelligence, holding political authority, during the founding era. And this is why he matters, okay? Because Cheswell helped build the country. In the most literal sense, he helped protect his community, enforce local law, manage public resources, keep the resistance organized, while independence was being fought over. And while most Americans learn about Paul Revere, very few ever learn about this black public official who rode that night to defend the colonies. And when people picture the 1770s, leadership is automatically assumed to be white male. And his life breaks that frame because Newmarket kept electing him year after year. I mean, I'm talking about during the height of slavery, they kept electing him. While the revolution was happening, he still was in office. Now, another gentleman that they mentioned was Lemuel Haynes. He was born on July 18, 1753, and he died on September 28, 1833. He was one of the most important and overlooked intellectual voices of the Revolutionary era. Another black man. He was born in West Hartford, Connecticut. Okay, his mama was a white indentured servant. I want y'all to picture this, okay? His mother, allegedly, her name was Lucy or Alice Fitch, and she worked for the Haynes family in West Hartford. Now, another theory is that Lucy may have been used as a cover and that Lemuel's mother may have been connected to a more prominent family in Hartford, okay? And you all kind of understand what I'm about to say. It would have been a scandal. You got an African father who is likely an enslaved man, and you got a white mother who is either a servant or, either an indentured servant or a rich woman from a Hartford, a wealthy Hartford family. Well, anyway, as an infant, Lemuel Haynes, he was abandoned at about 5 months old. But when it comes to why his mother did it and who exactly his parents were, the record gets thin and messy. But that's part of the stories. But what I really want you to understand is that when it comes to Lemuel Haynes, we talk about New England, a white woman having a child with a black man. That was going to bring public shame from the church. It was going to bring discipline. There may have been legal trouble. It could have brought economic ruin, especially if she was a poor servant. And if Lemuel's mother was indentured, she had very little control over her life, and a pregnancy could mean more punishment or dismissal or being marked in the small town where everyone knew everybody's business. So even if she loved her baby, she might have believed that the child would have had a better chance living in another household than staying with a mother who had no stable income, no legal protection, and no social power. And here's another hard truth in that era. Towns often solved poverty by binding out children. In other words, they would place them in an apprenticeship or a quote unquote indentured servitude in another home. And that practice was common for poor or socially vulnerable families. And then on top of that, this is a mulatto child or what we call a black child. So Lemuel abandonment inside a wider system, okay? Now what ended up happening to Lemuel, okay? Now you heard what Glenn Beck had to say, all right? But I'm gonna break it down. Think about this. This is an abandoned black child, okay? This abandoned black child that nobody wanted. He was placed as an indentured servant as an infant to a man named Deacon David Rose in Granville, Massachusetts. He was raised and educated under the terms of the indentured servitude. That meant he was bound to work for a set number of years, but he was not enslaved for life. Even with limited formal schooling, Haynes educated himself through intense self-study and reading theology and philosophy and political writings that shaped the American Revolution. That self-education positioned him to speak directly into the moral, ideological debates of his generation. In 1776, this abandoned black child grew up, okay? He served briefly in the militia, answering the call to defend the colonies under George Washington, his commander-in-chief, and he lived the contradiction of fighting for liberty while slavery still existed around him. After the war in 1785, Haynes became the first Black American ordained mainstream Protestant denomination church. He ran, shout out to Dan Taylor. You understand that? And that was a big deal. You became the first ordained mainstream. He became the first Black ordained preacher in the mainstream Protestant denomination in the Congregational Church. That is a big deal. Church was everything back then. And here's something even more remarkable. He pastored a predominantly white congregation in Vermont, Massachusetts, and New York for more than 30 years. So this man had two churches he was in charge of. And at the time when racial hierarchy was becoming deeply embedded in American society, white churches repeatedly entrusted him with spiritual leadership. In 1804, in Middlebury College in Vermont, this man was awarded an honorary arts degree, making him the first known Black American or foundational Black American to receive a master's degree in the United States. But Haynes' greatest contribution It wasn't simply symbolic. It was ideological. Shout out to What G30, just to let you know who he was and where he was coming from. In 1776, at the very beginning of the Revolutionary War, this black man wrote an essay that said, "Liberty further extended." In it, he took the core language of the revolution, liberty, natural rights, equality, and extended it to its logical conclusion. This is what he said, if all men are created equal, he argued, then those words must apply to black Americans as well. So we're not talking about some raccoon or sellout. We're talking about a man who looked at slavery, said this is wrong, and said, if you all are willing to fight for your own freedom, and you have these inalienable rights, liberty and natural rights and equality, surely they must apply to black Americans, because that's who he identified with. He was a black man. Now, he said this, if colonists were justified in resisting British tyranny, then enslaved black people were justified in resisting bondage against you all. And Haynes didn't just reject the revolution's ideals, he affirmed them, and he demanded consistency for his own people. He believed rights belong to individuals under God, not to a racial group. And in doing that, he articulated the difference between individual rights and collective race-based privilege. So he was already talking about white privilege way back then, right? And what was the effect of that liberty further extended? Again, it wasn't immediate abolition, but it planted the moral seed at the founding of this country. It forced Americans to confront the contradiction between their political claims that and their social practice. Haynes helped shape how people thought about America. He helped shape how Americans thought about America, not merely as a rebellion against Britain, but as a test of whether liberty would truly be universal. He pushed the nation to measure itself against its own words. This man held a mirror up for America to see. That intellectual challenge, it would echo through abolition, civil rights struggles, constitutional debates for generations. This man was buried in South Granville, New York. His historical markers in the church, historians, they recognize him as a pioneer, not as a black theologian, but as a patriot. And his sermons are still studied in religious history circles today. And yet, we don't hear about him in our textbooks, do we? You see, because his life complicates the simplified story of early America. Here was a black man born in 1753, abandoned because he was a mulatto child born to a white woman, serving as in the military in the Revolutionary War in 1776, ordained in 1785, leading a white congregation across multiple states, receiving a master's degree in 1804, preaching annually about George Washington, all while shaping the moral argument of the new nation. You understand? Every year, he would go preach a sermon about George Washington. They were friends. You understand what I'm saying? And this is why Lemuel Haynes is foundational. This is why he is a foundational black American. This is who we are. See, others helped win the war with weapons. Haynes helped define what the victory meant. He stood at the beginning of the country and insisted that liberty, if it's real, must be consistent. And in that sense, he didn't just participate in founding, he helped shape America's conscience. He helped form America's way of thinking. I want you to understand that. Now, Lemuel Haynes was more than just a historical figure. He represented what it means to be a foundational black American. You understand? He married a woman named Elizabeth Babbitt in 1783. They had 10 children in 1785 and through 1803. Many of them lived well into the 1880s, including Samuel Woodbridge Haynes, who became a famous physician. You understand? And another person, Elizabeth Capron, who lived up until 1866. So she got to see her father's work till its end. She got to see her father's words come to fruition in the end. And they lived through the Civil War. And they saw it come to it. They lived through Reconstruction and Jim Crow and civil rights. And many of those family members are still alive today. And this is why distinction matters. Foundational Black Americans are those whose ancestors were present at the nation's creation, fighting, building, preaching, and sacrificing when America was formed. They share a lineage rooted in 18th century American soil, and Lemuel Haynes was one of those many lives who were there at the foundation. Now, let's talk about the Boston Tea Party. Okay? People imagine Boston in 17, they picture this, shout out to Point Zero. They picture Sam Adams and, Paul Revere and John Hancock, a bunch of white dudes. It was a bunch of white dudes. It's true. It's Boston. It's always been Boston. But, Boston produced that environment. I want you to understand the environment that we talk about, man. Okay? Who was in this environment? Because, see, Boston produced the people who decided we're going to go and do something to this ship. We're going to put some mohawks on and dress up like Indians, and we're going to jump on this ship and throw all the tea over the water. But see, the thing is, Boston had visible black leadership. It had black labor. It had black intellectual presence. And any story that leaves those names out is not telling the whole truth. It's telling a narrowed version designed to shrink the founding into the property of one group, white people, specifically white men. But the record shows otherwise. The revolutionary Boston was more complex, it was more diverse, it was more interconnected than the simplified myth suggests. Look, at the same time, you got this Boston Tea Party thing going on. You got Phyllis Wheatley. Okay, she was living in the same city. She was enslaved as a child and brought from West Africa to Boston. She published poems on various subjects, religious and moral, in 1773, the very year of the Tea Party. She became the first published Black American poet and one of the first published women poets in America. One of the first published women poets in America at a time when, women didn't really have rights. This woman wrote letters back and forth with George Washington. You understand what I'm saying? She corresponded with George Washington on a regular basis. I want y'all to understand that, okay? This is the founder of the country. And this man openly gave her praise for her work. Phyllis Wheatley, a black woman, he praised her work publicly. Her intellect directly changed the racist claim that black people were inferior. She was so good at what she did. Boston society knew her name. The president knew her name. She wasn't invisible in 1773. Her presence alone shattered the lie of black intellectual incapacity. This is a black woman, Phyllis Wheatley. And we also had Prince Hall. I'm sure we have some Masons in here. He was an abolitionist. He was a community organizer. He helped lay the foundation for organized black civic life. He initiated the Freemasonry in 1775. He later founded what became Prince Hall Freemasonry, one of the most enduring black institutions in America. He petitioned for the abolition of slavery in Massachusetts. He advocated for black education. He pushed for equal rights in a city that was loudly proclaiming liberty while still tolerating bondage. He represents organized, strategic black leadership in revolutionary Boston. They explained that this is the environment that gave rise to the Boston Tea Party. Okay? This is what I want. This is what was going on here. There was a strong, prominent black intellectual base there. And there's absolutely no way you can give honest credit to the valiant black people who participated in the founding of this country and still maintain a system built on white supremacy and racial superiority. The reason this nation is free is because of black labor, resistance, intelligence, and sacrifice of black Americans. History had to be whitewashed. And once you fully acknowledge how deeply foundational black Americans were woven into the birth of this nation, that myth of a white nation collapses. Look, the Boston Tea Party took place on December 16, 1773 in Boston, Massachusetts. Most people picture it's a bunch of white men dressed up in mohawks dumping tea into the harbor to protest the Tea Act and British rule. And see, that disguise is true, but what's misleading is how later paintings and movies show Boston as if it were completely white. And there were no cameras. It was in 1773, so the famous images were made years later. Like there was one called The Destruction of the Tea at Boston Harbor. Okay, it's in an engraving by a gentleman named W.D. Cooper. It happened in 1789. And these artistic interpretations are shaped by the ideas of their time. They're not neutral, okay, on the record. Because, see, in the early 1770s, Boston had 5,500 to 6,000 residents. About 700 to 800 of them were black. That was about 12 to 15%, okay? That's roughly 1 out of every 8 people, or 8 or 9 people. Black people had been in Boston since the 1600s through the transatlantic slave trade. Slavery was legal in Massachusetts, even though it wasn't like the large plantations in the South. Boston was a major port in the triangular trade. It sent goods to Africa, transported enslaved Africans to the Americas, and they brought sugar cane and molasses up from the Caribbean up to the New England area. And enslaved Africans also came from Jamaica and Barbados because these were also English territories. And so by the mid-1700s, you had black families that had lived in Massachusetts for generations. And so by 1773, Boston had enslaved and free black laborers and sailors and craftsmen and domestic workers, and also had some property owners. Again, what I'm trying to explain to you all, black Boston, okay, was part of the city. They worked at the docks. They carried the cargo. Who would know the ship channel better than some black folks? Are you telling me who worked on the docks? Are you telling me there was no black men at the Boston Tea Party? Huh? Boston in 1770 was crowded and politically tense. It is unrealistic to think hundreds of black residents were unaware of the debates over taxes and British control. And one thing we always, Crispus Attucks, he was dead center of all of it, literally dead center. He was a dock worker himself. He was a sailor of African and Native ancestry who was killed on March 5th, 1770 during what was called the Boston Massacre, 3 years before the Tea Party. And he's remembered as the first person killed in the Revolutionary War. And his death helped fuel anger against Britain. You understand me? So of course there were black men participating in the Boston Tea Party. Now, when the Revolutionary War began, I'm going to lay some foundation. I want you to understand the composition of the American militia and the Continental Army. All right? That's the American Army. All right? They fought for freedom. So the Revolutionary War began in 1775 in Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill. The American fighting wasn't exclusively white. Okay? In New England, black men were serving in the militia units from the very beginning of the conflict. It was largely young men. It was farmers, it was laborers, it was tradesmen, and of course, black men. And I want to walk y'all through something carefully. I want you to listen. I'm going to throw some numbers at you, but I want you to listen to me. So by 1775, the total colonial population was 2.5 million. I explained that to you. Roughly 500,000 were black. Overall, that's about 20%. So of the 13 colonies, about 20% were black. The overwhelming majority of the black population lived in the southern colonies. What were the southern colonies? It was Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Maryland, okay? And that's where most of the plantations were. That's where the slave labor was, okay? It was central to the economy. Now, first, to gain an understanding, you have to remove the southern black population who were largely barred from military service. I need you to understand something. The last thing those southern plantation owners wanted to do is give black men guns and tell them to go shoot white men. It didn't matter if they were British or Hessian or whatever. They were not about to give these black men guns. Because see, after the war was over, whoever would have won the war, those black men would not have forgot that they learned how to shoot white men in the Revolutionary War. And they would not have put those guns down without a fight. And you can imagine that that could lead to some, we'll just say, severe complications when it came to trying to reinstitute and maintain the color hierarchy and the plantation system of chattel slavery. It just wasn't going to happen. So the Southern plantation was like, we don't care what you do with you those black folks up there. We will not be giving our Negroes guns. We're going to lose this war. We would rather lose it than give these blacks guns. No, you understand what I'm saying? And you can understand where they were coming from. So you got to just totally wipe 450,000 black people that could have potentially fought in the Civil War. They just not going to do it. So of the 50,000 that were eligible, okay, most of those were in the New England area. That would have included Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. The black population was much smaller. Historians estimate that the black people were about 3 to 4% in New England. Okay, New England's population in 1755 was about 700,000 people. That's the little 5 states. So if 3.4% were black, okay, that means approximately 21 to 28,000 black people lived in the New England area, right? Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, okay? 21 to 28,000 lived up there. About half would be men. So anywhere from 10 to 14,000 black men of all ages now, okay? And while we talk about this, we want to talk about who served and who didn't, who was representing, who was at the foundation, who put the most up in the fight for our freedom here in this country, okay? Now I want you to understand something. Not every man, not all those men were military age. If we conservatively estimate that about 40 to 50% of those fighting age, this is anywhere from teens to 40. You don't want to put nobody 55 out there. I need me a nap in the middle of the day. You can't put me on the front lines. Okay, I'm going to go to sleep. You don't want to put the kids out there, so it's going to be the teenagers to about the mid-40s. After that, you need to hang it up. So if you add that number up, they're basically saying there's about 4,000 to 7,000 black men who are eligible to fight in the Revolutionary War in the New England area, which is the only place that you can get black men who are lawfully allowed. Because remember, the Southerners wasn't giving you none of their dark people. No, you can't have them. We're going to keep them right here. They're going to be down here picking cotton and cutting tobacco. We're not sending them up there. We are not going to give them muskets. Absolutely not. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? So now you just stuck with who we got. We got black men in the New England area. We got between 4,000 to 7,000. Those they're free men. They can sign up and fight. Okay? Now I want you to compare that to the military participation. Historians estimate that between 5,000 to 8,000 black soldiers served on the American side over the entire war. You understand what I just said? So there was between 4,000 to 7,000 black men in the New England area at the onset of the war who were eligible to serve because of age. And over the duration of the war, between 5,000 to 8,000 black soldiers served on the American side over the war, during this Revolutionary War. That is a significant portion. You see? That is a significant, even if we conservatively assume that only 3,000 to 4,000 of these black men from the New England area were black soldiers, that would mean out of roughly 4,000 to 7,000 military age men in New England, somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 served. That would translate to about 40 to 60% of black men served in the military who were eligible. Think about that. That level of participation is extraordinarily high relative to our population size. Remember, these were not men compelled by draft laws that targeted them specifically. These were free black men. Many volunteered. Many stepped forward while slavery still existed around them. Now think about the moral weight of that. Imagine today we got about 22 million black men in the United States. Imagine a war breaks out, and imagine 10 or 11 million of them, that's nearly half, voluntarily step forward and fight for our country that still denies us full equality, based on how they look. You understand that? That's the type of numbers we're talking about. That would be staggering. We dealing with police brutality and health issues and still dealing with some remnants of Jim Crow, and yet and still half of the black men show up and say, yeah, I'm willing to fight. That would dominate the headlines. That would be remembered as one of the most powerful displays of patriotism and civic commitment in American history. And that's the scale of commitment we're talking about when you properly isolate the northern free black men and compare them to the documented service numbers. And here's the deeper point. Here's the thing. These men didn't have to serve. They were free. They had families. They lived in small communities where their absence would be felt. You didn't have people to help you work on the farm. The men were gone. And they fought for liberty, for people who look like them, while people who look like them remain slaves elsewhere in the colonies. So when we talk about sacrifice, we have to ask, who gave more? Who gave more? Is it the wealthy man who gives $10,000 and barely feels it? Or is it the poor man who has $50 and gives $25, half of what he has? See, when you have a small minority population that contributes at rates equal to or greater than the majority, that's not marginal participation. That is outside sacrifice. And that's the part of the revolutionary story that rarely gets emphasized. Black men in the North who were eligible to fight on behalf of the freedom of this country were not spectators to the founding. They were present, they were armed, they were in the ranks, and proportionally they appeared to have served at levels that reflected deep commitment to an American experience that had not yet fully committed to them. Now, we're gonna kind of spice this thing up a little bit. So, seeing what was going on, right? God darn it. Britain said, hold on a minute. You mean they're gonna bring the blacks? They're gonna let the niggers join? The nigger. So guess what? They saw what was going on, and Britain decided to do, I'm gonna just say it, Britain threw some shit in the game, okay? We talked about bush cats earlier. Now we talking about throwing some shit in the game. Excuse my language. By the way of a gentleman named Lord Dunmore. He was the last royal governor of Virginia. He was appointed by the British Crown, the king, before the American Revolution, and his real name was John Murray. Okay, he was the 4th Earl of Dunmore. He was Scottish nobleman. He was a hardliner. Shout out to DT YN. Thank you so much. He was loyal to the crown. This man, he tried to dissolve the Virginia Colonials Assembly. Okay, he tried to crash their little party. You know where they've signed them documents. He restricted their access to gunpowder. I want you to understand something. These people, remember, they were still fighting the Indians. The Indians were trying to kill everybody. The Indians out there, you got to go, right? And so they said, no, you can't have gunpowder. You understand what I'm saying? Huh? So you like, hold on a minute. You don't want us to have gunpowder. We got these Indians over here, and you're trying to restrict us from the gunpowder. So this is who this for. He'd rather for them to get scalped and shot with the bow and arrows than give them access to gunpowder and have them turn against him. Okay, he wasn't liked, as you can imagine, right? They did not like him at all. And now in 1775, the good governor, it got hot. Okay, the spot got hot. They didn't like him. The temperature was getting turned up. Everybody was talking about revolution. And so he left the capital city of Williamsburg. And this man, he took his little rowboat, him and his people, and they rowed out to a British warship off the Virginia coast, where he then, at that point, notoriously issued a proclamation declaring that any enslaved black man who was owned by an American rebel who escaped and joined the British forces will be granted instant freedom. Oh, no, you didn't. Lord Dunmore issued his proclamation in 1775, offering freedom to any enslaved black person who joined, any enslaved black man who joined the British forces. Let me explain something to you. Imagine him sitting out in the middle of his little ship. Okay, he done ran off on the ship. I want you to picture this, just think about it. He's out there with a little piece of paper, unrolling it. Okay, I hearken unto me, all ye who dwell in bondage beneath the sun. I, John Murray, the 4th Earl of Dunmore, last Royal Governor of Virginia, appointed by the mighty crown of Britain, do proclaim this degree in the year of our Lord 1775. The colonies tremble in rebellion. Their assemblies defy the king, their power is seized, their loyalty is broken, and thus the game hath changed. Let it be known across the field and forest and across the plantation and port that any niggard man belonging to the rebels should be cast off his chains and take up arms in service of his king. Our majesty shall be granted his freedom. Rise, therefore, rise up, ye sons of Africa. Take up the banner of the crown and stand in battle against those who cry liberty, yet deny it unto ye. Fight for the king, and the shackles that bind thee shall be struck down. So is declared, so is written, so saith Dunmore. Out there on the ship. Out there on the ship. Right? Somebody probably had to come and look, the old governor said, y'all can be free. Come on over here with us. So anyway, again, this wasn't done. This was not some sort of benign humanitarian decree, right? He wasn't doing it out of the kindness of his heart. Because, see, the British were willing to use emancipation as a tool of war. Same thing Abraham Lincoln did, right? They recognized the offer of freedom was powerful. It was a powerful recruiting tactic. I want you to think about this. You out there getting beat up by massa, and this one white man said, look, if you come over here and join with us, we'll give you a gun. You can go back and shoot your master if you want to. That's what you want to do, right? Would y'all take that offer? Huh? Because the whole point, again, he didn't care about freeing black people, but he wanted to get that manpower away from those rebel plantations, and it added thousands of people to their ranks. Okay, I'm literally telling you. So for thousands of enslaved black men and women who lived under bondage, the British offer was more than a battle tactic. It was a once in a lifetime get out of slavery free card, and thousands, and when I say thousands, I mean tens of thousands of black people took that offer. And this move changed the war in the South. In the South, remember, the South was Virginia, it was North Carolina, it was South Carolina, it was Georgia. Can you imagine that? And Maryland, can you have been giving a bunch of dudes from Baltimore some guns? Are you kidding me? I'll say, why? I can't even do that Baltimore accent. Yeah. Anyway, Baltimore was actually considered a middle colony. But what started as a political fight over taxes and representation, it became something much bigger. And so for thousands, and I mean tens of thousands, and I think the estimates are there was roughly, 20,000 black people ran to the British side. And so the Revolutionary War, what it did, it revealed a major contradiction. The colonialists said they were fighting for liberty, yet many of them still held people in slavery, including George Washington, many of the founding fathers. The British took advantage of that contradiction by offering freedom to enslaved black men who would join them. And enslaved black men saw an opportunity, and slaveholders saw, oh, damn, danger. And this made the war in the South especially tense and complicated. See, it wasn't just a fight between colonies and the crown. Okay, it was no longer just a fight between white people and who's going to own this land. Because many black people, it was about survival and the chance to be free. And the numbers were significant. Okay, they say between 800 and 2,000 enslaved men first escaped to Lord Dunmar's camp to form what was called the Ethiopian Regiment. And later, British promises there were some more people. There was a gentleman named Sir Henry Clinton. He came up with his Phillipsburg. He came up with the Phillipsburg Proclamation, and he expanded the offer, and he got 20,000. 20,000 showed up, baby. 20,000 enslaved black men came to the British side, and many worked as laborers, sailors, guides, and some even fought as soldiers. Now imagine what this did to the mentality of these people in the South. Okay, these are your former slaves, and now they're over here with the British. Now keep in mind, I want you to understand something. The what would have been the United States, the America, they had about 4,000 to 7,000 black people, and the British had like 20,000 black people. And you telling us we can't let these black folks in the South join? Okay? Now let's table that for a minute. Let's table that for a minute. And I want you to just put yourself in the mind of these white folk down south. It wasn't just about them losing their slaves, their workers, their free labor, right? Suddenly you got formerly enslaved black men. They get guns. They get some military training. They got a cause. And possibly they come back organized and motivated by freedom instead of fear. And see, that wasn't just scary. That was a nightmare for these people. Because there's one thing to deal with a rebellion. It's another thing to deal with a black army. Okay, the same people that had worked so hard, they worked so hard to control them. You know, they had all these different techniques and tactics and stuff. What was that called? I forget what it's called, man. But you know, keeping them divided, and now they are united with a gun. The same people you had worked to death and beat and raped and gone so hard to try to control. Shout out to Lisa H-Town. Not a plot twist. I mean, for years, Southern slave owners have built their system on control and controlling bodies and movement and education and weapons and arming themselves. And enslaved black people weren't even allowed to read or travel freely or even carry a gun. You better not look at a gun. The whole system depended on keeping us powerless. And then the British come along and basically said, if you escape and fight for us, you'll be free. And yes, we'll hand you a gun. And you can imagine the plantation owners clutching their powdered wigs. Oh my God, can you imagine that? The darkest are coming. Okay, now for an enslaved man, this wasn't about loving Britain. Okay, because see, slavery was still going on in Britain at this time. All right, if you live your whole life under forced labor and someone offers you a real chance to be free, that's a powerful motivation. But let's keep it accurate. Historians don't show any massive revenge campaigns, okay? But what they did, many escaped, were just trying to survive. There was a lot of issues they were dealing with. But the bottom line is, this had them shook. It forced the Americans to rethink their whole plan, and it even pushed some colonies to say, look, we're going to have to enlist some more of these blacks. We're going to have to get some of these blacks down south that y'all have enslaved. Y'all going to have to send them up here. Because see, when your worst fear starts marching in formation, you tend to make adjustments. Now, I'm going to tell you a story that most of y'all never heard of. There was a gentleman, his name was Colonel Titus Cornelius. They call him Colonel Ty. Okay, and the real fear of the American wasn't just losing battles. It was seeing a formerly enslaved black man become trained and organized and arm and lead attacks against the very people who once claimed to own him. This man fought on behalf of the British. Okay, I want you to put this in mind. He was up in the New Jersey area. He fought on behalf of England against his former slave owners, the Americans. All right? Okay, I want you to picture this now. Just think about this. It shook the whole racial system. You got one man who he did exactly what I'm talking about. His name was Colonel Ty. He was born in he was born in Mammoth County, New Jersey. He was the kind of name that could make a American militia officer lose sleep. Titus escaped slavery in 1775, right when the British start promising freedom to enslaved people, okay? He ran away from his owner and went to support the Brit, to support the crown. And once he reached the British lines, he didn't just sign up, he rose up. He became a notorious black loyalist fighter to the crown and eventually led a raiding group known as the Black Brigade. Okay, and they gave him the title colonel, and it wasn't an official British rank, but it showed the respect he had earned. And so from the rebels' point of view, or from the American point of view, Colonel Ty seemed ruthless. I mean, mainly because he was so effective. He and his men carried out fast nighttime raids on farms. He just knew the terrain. They took weapons, they took horses. They took cattle and supplied. I mean, they captured white people. They held them prisoner. This man, a former slave, he was just a slave of 3-4 months ago, and now he putting white people in handcuffs. Imagine the shock. Okay? Men who once had power are now finding themselves in chains at the hand of one of their former enslaved. Colonel Ty, his unit operated under the British stronghold in Sandy Hook in an area called refugee town, and they were loyalists, and they were looking for freedom. His men knew the roads, they knew the back roads, they knew the rivers, they knew the back paths. You know, it's a lot of mountains up around there. They knew everything. They knew how to get in and out because they were local. Okay, they would hit you at night. They would disappear. Imagine you looking out the window. Next thing you know, you see a bunch of black dudes coming with guns. Oh my God, Martha, get the muskets. Right? Hide the children. Right? They hit and run. They had the guerrilla tactics going on. And it was embarrassing for the American militia in the communities. They prided themselves in being in control. They took their supplies, their livestock. They unalived important militia leaders. And then they also tried to free enslaved black people during the raids. And see, this wasn't random violence. It was wartime strategy. It meant to weaken the American control and draw more enslaved people toward the British protection. And several raids made Ty his name famous, right? He worked alongside other people, the groups like the Queen's Rangers, right? And the rebel leaders in Monmouth County saw him as such a serious threat that just hearing he was nearby caused panic. Hearing this black man was nearby made them all afraid. They were just peeing on themselves at night. You understand? Their little wigs was shaking, little white wigs and everything, just scared to death. Now he ended up getting shot and he died from his wound. They were raiding. In 1780, so he did this for 5 or 6 years. This man was notorious. But they were raiding a home of a man named Captain Joshua Jack Huddy, and he was an American officer known for being very harsh to the British loyalists. And during the raid, they shot him in the wrist, and the wound got infected, and he died of tetanitis, and they called it lockjaw. And after his death, the Black Brigade, it continued forward. There was another man that stepped up to him, another black man named Stephen Bluck that stepped up after him and took over the leadership. So it didn't end. All right. And that's just on the British side. So you have all sorts of stories. I can't tell you everything, right? We only have a limited amount of time. But if you look at the Revolutionary War and you look up Colonel Ty Cornelius, it would be definitely something you should take a look at. Now, let's go back to the American side. Let's go back, so again, we're just establishing that we were here at the foundation fighting on both sides. Now, I want to talk to you all about Bunker Hill, okay, and why this thing called Bunker Hill mattered. It was one of the first major battles of the American Revolutionary War. It took place on June 17, 1775, right outside of Boston, on the Charleston Peninsula. And even though it's called Bunker Hill, most of the fighting happened on Breeds Hill, where about 12,000 colonial militia had dug some holes in the ground. They put a bunch of earth up overnight to try to challenge the British control of the Boston Harbor. They needed to control the harbor. You control the harbor, you control who can come in, who can't, you control the supply lines. And the battle came just 2 months after Lexington and Concord. Now, early, I want y'all to remember this name. There's this British general, his name was Thomas Gage, and he sent about 700 regular soldiers from Boston to Concord to seize the weapons and gunpowder, right? And so that's when Paul Revere said, the British are coming, the British are coming. And writers like Paul Revere warned the colonies. So at Lexington, about 70 militia faced several hundred British soldiers, and a shot was fired. And they call it the shot heard around the world. And the truth is, nobody else really cared. Okay, this is just a British problem. But 8 colonialists were killed, and the British just smashed them. The British just wiped them out. They was like, damn, y'all don't stand a chance. Y'all dusty. It's not going to work. Okay? So, but at Concords, at the Battle of Concords, what they call North Bridge, hundreds of militia gathered, and they forced the British to retreat. And so they won that engagement. So now here we got, 2 out of 3, right? Right? That's what we're looking at. You guys won the first, we won the second. So now here we are at Bunker Hill. And it mattered not because the colonials kept the hill. They didn't. They actually lost the hill. But because it proved the war wouldn't be quick and it wouldn't be easy for Britain, and it was going to cost them a lot. It's going to cost a lot of damages. They had other territories around. But bottom line is, this is going to cost you. And so here, even this, there are black soldiers who fought at that war, people that we remember through history. Okay? Again, we talking about, Bunker Hill, specifically the black soldiers, Salem Poor, okay, Barzelia Lou, Pompey Peters, Cuff Whitmore. So out of approximately 1,500 to 2,000 soldiers, right? 3 to 5% of them were black. Okay. Now Samuel Poor is somebody they brought up earlier. He distinguished himself famously at Bunker Hill. Okay. He was born in 1747 and he died in 1802. He was a member of the Massachusetts militia, born into slavery in Andover, Massachusetts. Brother Poor purchased his own freedom in 1769. Okay, in 1769, at about 22 years old, he purchased his own freedom for 27 pounds, which is equal to about a year's wages for a working man. That average working wage, so it was about $50,000 in 2026 money, more or less. But by the time the colonialists had got there to fortify, breed, brother Poor's unit had been sent forward to assist, and when the other troops ran low on ammunition, and they began to run, but he wouldn't let his people run. Salem Poor said, "No, we're gonna stay here," and he sent forward to assist. He went forward to assist the other troops, and his group stayed, and they kept fighting the British amid the dead bodies and the bleeding bodies and the chaos on the battlefield. You got musket fire. Mr. Poor slowed his own retreat to help the wounded American soldiers, and he continued to shoot at the British soldiers. And his ability to remain cool, calm, and collective and protect his fellow soldiers and fight effectively under heavy fire, it set him apart from everybody, okay? Because, see, you had a lot of people who were inexperienced, that were overwhelmed, and they ran like hell. But Salem Poor his conduct was so remarkable that you had 14 white officers. That's a damn near all of them. They felt so compelled to single him out for his calm, his courage, and give him praise. This is a black man. It's unheard of. They literally petitioned the Massachusetts government in December 1775, okay, and asked them that he be recognized, okay? And they said things like he behaved like an experienced officer as well as an excellent soldier, and that in the person of this said Negro centers a brave and gallant soldier. This is what they said about this black man. They acknowledged that detailing every act, you can't detail every act because it would be too tedious. He did so much. You understand? They suggested the Congress consider whatever reward was due such a distinguished character. And yet, despite those efforts, the general court never acted on it. But the bottom line is, this is how highly they praise this man. He was cool, calm, and collected under pressure. He executed his role with precision and steadiness, expected of somebody who's a trained leader, and he was not any of that. This is who this black man was. You see? The cold part about this man re-enlisted several more times throughout the war. And so he proved that he had a sustained commitment rather than just this single heroic movement. This is what we were doing. This is what we were doing at the founding of this country. This is one black man. You got another man. His name is Barzillai Lou. Now, you got to understand something. He was a free black man from Massachusetts, and he was born to enslaved parents who eventually gained freedom. Now, during the Revolutionary War, he fought at Bunker Hill, and he later re-enlisted in the Continental Army. He served during the French and Indian War before the Revolution, giving him some prior military experience. But beyond the battlefield, I want you to understand that he was a skilled musician. Okay? He was a skilled musician. He had learned to play. This is the Boston area. He was a musician, man. They had music, so he was already part of the culture. All right? He played the drums. He played something called the fife. And the thing you got to understand is these instruments are critical on the battlefield at the time. And that detail matters because military music wasn't just ceremonial. It controlled the troop movements and the communication. Okay, he basically served as a flute player and a drummer. All right, and we talk about someone performing one of the most dangerous but essential jobs on the battlefield. In 1775, there's no radios, there's no field telephones, there's no GPS, there's no encrypted signals. Once the gunshot starts and the cannon smoke fills the air, you couldn't hear shouted orders beyond a short distance. Officers couldn't text commands to anybody. They couldn't call headquarters. The only way to move troops was through sound signals, drum beats, and musical instruments like the fife. Okay? That's how you got these people to do what they're supposed to do. Each beat meant something. Advance, retreat, hold position, reload, reform ranks, ceasefire. And so this person who played this fife or this drum, he stood exposed. Okay, so they're no unit, he can't hide behind anything because nobody could hear him. And that means while the musket balls and the gunfire was ripping through the air, cannonballs were smashing into the dirt and, flesh, men, blood and guts everywhere, right? The music had to keep playing or the confusion would follow. And the confusion in the 18th century line of warfare means somebody's going to get slaughtered. And I want you to think about the courage that required. You're not crouched behind a wall reloading. You're standing, you're blowing your little flute, right? You're beating your drums so hundreds of men can hear you over gunfire. Your job is not to hide. Your job is to be heard. And that makes you visible, and that makes you a target. And you don't stop because you're scared. If you stop, the line collapses. So this brother, Barzillai Lou, played during engagements, and he wasn't just playing music. He was transmitting battlefield instructions in real time while soldiers are shooting at him and around him and people are getting shot. That takes courage. That's not abstract courage. That's physical courage, the kind where you stand in noise and smoke and chaos, and you do your job anyway. And see, that's the type of military participation. That's the type of refined cultural presence that free black families embedded in the colonies had before the war even started. So we were here before the revolution. We were here before it was a country. That's another person. Now tell you about somebody else. Y'all bored? Let me know if you're bored. I need to know if you're bored. You guys enjoying this? Let me know. I got a couple more and I'm going to let y'all out of here. But I wanted to make sure I get it. We are foundational black Americans. Okay? Now, another person I want to talk to you guys about is Pompey Peters. He was born enslaved in Massachusetts. He served in the Army. He fought at Bunker Hill. And I mean, what I'm trying to, and this is, he didn't do anything amazing or spectacular, but he did serve. Now, what happened to him after is interesting because, see, after the war, Pompey Peters' story didn't fade. He moved north into what's known as Maine, or what was Maine it was still part of Massachusetts at the time. But he became one of the early black settlers in that region. And that migration wasn't random. After the revolution, land in northern New England offered opportunity for veterans seeking independence, land ownership for black men in the late 18th century. It wasn't automatic or incidental. It was, it was a powerful thing to own land in a country where people were segregated and separated and, enslaved. Okay? And he was, he paid taxes. He secured the land legally. He cultivated the land. He wasn't just some passive existence. Because see, they always try to say things like, "Oh, y'all were just slaves." No, we weren't all just slaves. This was a veteran landowner. All right, and what that means is he contributed to the agricultural output and sustained local markets. It meant he was producing crops and possibly livestock, possibly timber, feeding trade networks in northern New England. It meant he was paying taxes and supported the roads and the local governance and the infrastructure. It meant he was part of the economic engine of the young republic, trying to stabilize itself after a war. Landowners didn't just work their own soil. They often exchanged labor with neighbors. They hired seasonal help. They traded goods. They participated in the community economy. Ownership placed black men inside the legal and financial structure of a nation at the time. And when many would prefer to imagine the black Americans as economically peripheral, this man was front and center. You see, he contributed to the infrastructure of the country, the food supply, the trade, the taxation, the settlement patterns. This man lived to be 90 years old, all the way up through 1837. His life spanned the colonial slavery, the Revolutionary War, early Republic, and the tense decades leading into the antebellum slavery period. Okay? And see, his story reminds us that the revolution didn't end when the shooting stopped. It continued in the lives of those who fought, and then tried to claim their piece of this nation. You understand? Now, there was another gentleman. His name was Cuff Whitmore. He was one of those people. He was 22 years old. He wasn't enslaved. But around 22, he enlisted to fight as a Minuteman, in Lexington. And that matters because it shows that black men were present at the very beginning of the Revolutionary War, not some add-on. They didn't just bring us in later when they needed some slaves, right? They didn't do that. It means that, and I want you to understand something. Even though Whitmore is less famous than the Salem Poor or Peter Salem, his service proved something important. New England militias in 1775 were not all white. They were mostly white farmers and workers, but free black men stood in the same ranks, trained in the same fields and carried the same muskets and faced the same enemy fire at Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill. He wasn't placed in a separate support role. He wasn't segregated. He was on the front line. And see, that challenges the idea that early American forces were racially pure. See, people often say that the U.S. military wasn't integrated until President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 998 or 9981 in 1948. See, that order ended official segregation in the 20th century armed forces, but black men had already been fighting alongside white men and everybody else since 1775 during the Revolutionary War. Remember, between 5,000 to 8,000 black men served in the Continental Army. And that was about 40 to 60% of the eligible black men that could serve, right? We've been there. We fought in war in the War of 1812. Black soldiers served in mixed crews. In the Civil War, about 180,000 black men fought in the Union Army, nearly 20,000 in the Navy. Black Americans also served in World War I and World War II and Vietnam and every other conflict. So Whitmore's importance isn't his fame, it's what he represents. He stands for the many free black New Englanders, black men who joined the militia at the start of the revolution. His service shows black men were part of the organized defense of this country from the beginning. And the record is clear. Black Americans have fought in every war in the nation, and that's just one of them. Now, I want y'all to hear about this superstar. And they mentioned it in Glenn Beck talked about it. So you can't, and shout out to everybody who's contributed to Super Chat. I'm glad 15 people learned something. I wish more people had learned something, but we're not finished, but maybe some of you all will learn something. But again, I appreciate you guys. But before we get to this superstar, I need you all to make sure you hit the subscribe button if you hadn't already. I don't know if you all have. I have not had an opportunity to check and see if you hit the subscribe button, but I'm looking now. I'm going to look right now to see if you good people care about me enough to hit the subscribe button and help me, okay? Because at this point, it's about me. It's about me getting to 100,000 subscribers, and it's taking a long time. I'm just saying, I feel like I should be there by now as people. I need some more people to subscribe. I need approximately 66 people. Well, hold on. I need 63 people to subscribe to the channel right now, and that will get me to 95,000, okay? I need 63 people to subscribe to the channel, okay? I need 63 people. Somebody type 63 in the chat room. Chantel Smith, I need you to subscribe to the channel. Dwight Chair, I need you to subscribe to the channel, okay? Who else is in here? Jelena Taborn, I need all y'all to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Don't hate watch, okay? Don't have me up here forehead sweating, talking to you all about history, trying to make it interesting. I need all of y'all to subscribe to the channel right now. Don't play me. I'm not here for the games. I need my subscriptions to go up. I want a little gold plaque on my wall behind my head. Okay? Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. If you have already subscribed to the channel, double check, because YouTube plays these vicious games with me. I need 58 people to subscribe to the channel to get me where I need to be. Okay, 58. Somebody type 58. In addition to that, make sure you like, share, subscribe if you appreciate what I'm doing. Now, again, I want to tell you the story about Peter Salem. Peter Salem. He was a patriot. He was a giant killer. Black man. You can't talk about the Revolutionary War. You can't talk about Bunker Hill without talking about Peter Salem. We'll call him Peter Salem. We call him whatever you want to call him. Okay? It's not about him being a symbol. This is not about he was the first black man to join him. No, that ain't that. Okay? And I'm proud to talk about him. Okay? Because this man's actions changed the war. A black man. Black man born in slavery in Framingham, Massachusetts around 1750. He was owned by a man named Jeremiah Belknap, local landowner. And early in 1775, Mr. Belknap sold him to Major Lawson Buckminster, okay? Meaning Salem became the legal property of Mr. Buckminster, just as cattle or land might have been transferred between owners. And once Buckminster owned Salem, something crucial happened. Buckminster was appointed major in the Continental Army. And so as the tensions with the British erupted in the war at the time, Massachusetts, they had a law that said, look, we know you might want to bring your dark with you, but you got to free them, okay? The law said enslaved people cannot serve as soldiers or minutemen in the militia. So Buckminster said, damn, I just bought this nigger. Damn, I got to free him. So he had to free him. So Peter Salem got because his new master got appointed to be the major in the Continental Army, and he had to free him. Okay, I don't know if he wanted to do it, but he had to do it. So, he did what he had to do. So, okay, whatever. So this is so he could enlist in the Patriot Force. Remember, we got people shortages out here. We need bodies. But anyway, he enrolled in Buckminster's, he was in his company. It was the Framington Minutemen. And this wasn't just a gift. It was a practical necessity for Salem to join the fight. Slaves could generally not be mustered in the military service. The law required fighters to be free men. And by granting Salem his freedom, Buckminster enabled him to step onto the battlefield legally and fight as an equal among other enlisted men. So you gonna give me can you imagine Peter like, hold on, you gonna give me a gun to shoot white people? Shit. Yeah, I do it. I can imagine that. He was probably turned up. You understand what I'm saying? So anyway, once freed, Peter Salem joined the captain's Simon Eagle's company, and he fought at Lexington and Concord. We talked about those earlier. That was on April 19, 1775, and that was one of the first engagements. A black man at the first fight, first shots at the Revolutionary War. He there, black man, boots on the ground. And shortly after that, he enlisted formally in Colonel John Nixon's regiment and made his way to the pivotal Battle of Bunker Hill on June 17, 1775. At the age of 25, this black man, Peter Salem, was now a free black man fighting for American liberty. And even though the promise of liberty wasn't yet extended to all black people, on April 19, 1775, he was free. And he marched as a Minuteman into the battle at Lexington. And then 2 months later, he was over there at Bunker Hill, which we all know was really Breed's Hill, outside of Boston, and it was intense. Now I want you to picture this, okay? There's a man. His name is Major John Pitcairn, okay? Major John Pitcairn. He already made his mark. He was born in Scotland, 1722. He was a seasoned British Marine officer, okay? He helped lead the British forces at Lexington, whooped them, Concord, did something dirty to him. And so by June 17, 1775, the British troops ran up on the Americans at Breed's Hill, right outside of Boston. And Major John wasn't just he wasn't just another red coat in the ranks. He was recognized, okay? He was a commander. He was notorious for the amount of destruction he was causing. Major John had led troops early in Lexington, and the Patriots hated him, not just as an enemy, but as a man who literally started the war and killed Americans at Concord. He set it off. This is who we talk about. He is him. You understand me? He is him. Here's another thing. Like I said before, there's no radios, there's no telephone, there's no satellites. There's no instant communication with London. So once the fighting began, everything is dependent on the leader. Standing visible in the chaos, swords raised, directing men forward. And here's a deeper strategy. When a high-ranking officer is unable to communicate, right? It's not like modern warfare. Can't helicopter somebody in. News had to travel by ship across the Atlantic to Britain, and then that could take weeks. Decisions had to be made in London, and that could take months, and field armies had to be reorganized, and leadership had to be sent back. And the thing you got to understand is the British officers in America was limited in number. They didn't have experience in this and that and the other, okay? Now that morning, you got to understand something. So we at Bunker Hill. The British had tried to take this hill twice already, man. They just wouldn't go away. And then you got them little colonials, they dug down in those ditches, pew, pew, shooting at them, pew, right? Shooting and pew, pew, trying to, don't come up here no more. What's wrong with you? We tired of y'all, right? Okay? In the 18th century, officers like Major John were the center of the battlefield. Armies moved in tight formations. Leaders had to yell commands over loud musket fire. You had the drums playing, right, to communicate. I talked about that. Soldiers had to look at the flags to see, get instructions. Oh, where we gonna go? This battlefield, okay? So high-ranking officers weren't protected. They were prime targets, okay? You get rid of the officer, you weaken the structure. In the military system like that, all right? The British had already overrun their position, trying to overrun them twice, and they got pushed back. Okay, can you imagine how tired you are? Smoke, gunfire everywhere. You can barely breathe. You got your bullets flying everywhere. And here they come again for a third charge. People they just wouldn't go away. He just wouldn't stop, right? He just, go away, Major John. Stop trying to take this hill. You can't have the hill today. This is going to be our hill today, Major John, right? But those English Marines, they kept driving up that hill. They were going to take it one way or the other. And so standing out front of the troops, right? Wide open, right? Like he got Teflon on his body or something like that, right? You got Major John, okay, out there. And then here comes Peter Salem, right? I see you, old man, Major John. And here's what happened. Peter had already fought at Lexington and Concord. He lost friends. That's what happens in war. So he wasn't in the rear. He ain't, they're not putting black people in the rear anyway. You're a free slave. We're going to put you in the front. Come on up here, niggers. Come on, put the niggers in the front, right? That's what no, you can't sit in the front. That's only on the bus, right? When it comes to war, no, we want all the blacks up front, in the front line. On the bus, you sit in the back, okay? When it comes to fighting, we want to put you in the front, okay? Make you think you're special, but you're not, right? They really just, finally get to sit in the front, not on the bus, okay? We're talking about way before that. When the shooting starts, we want you in the front, right? Now, here's the thing. Like I said, you can see I'm looking at what was going on, right? And I got a picture of this because I want to remind you all of what we saw already. This is a picture of that battle at Bunker Hill. Let me see if I can pull it up for you. I want you guys to see it for yourself. Okay? Now I want you to see that picture. You see that picture right there? Now, if you look way over here in the corner, all right, this is old Pete right there, and it looked like he hiding behind somebody. That's how somebody painted the picture. But this is the hero of Bunker Hill. You understand? And this is old Major John right here. You understand? Now, here's what happened. Peter shot Major John. This black man that they see got his little head right here, he shot Major John and killed him. And this is the multiple historical accounts credit Peter Salem, a former slave who had been promised freedom. If he fought, they credit him with shooting and killing Major John Pickering. Okay? As he rallied his men for the third time, he got shot and he fell down, and they say he fell down in his son's arms. Baby John. Major John fell down in Baby John. I can imagine that. Okay? Daddy, don't die. Daddy, don't die. Don't die, Daddy. Major John died later on. And now when Peter shot struck him, this wasn't just another casualty. Okay? It sent a major message to the British. Lay down or stay down. In other words, if you all stay over here, all you're going to get is death. We're going to kill all y'all. And when a high-ranking officer drops, it gets dropped in 1775, it's not the next man up. It's not that type of situation. Back then, the Army ran on visible rank and tight formations. If you knocked out the guy giving the orders, everything else got messy real fast. Soldiers start looking around like, who's in charge? And now, in this rigid system like the British Army, you take out the leader and the whole thing just goes wobbled. It zoom out. Now I want you to zoom out. The British Army in America didn't have Wi-Fi. They didn't have FaceTime or a quick group chat with London. News had to sail across the Atlantic. That took weeks. Decisions from London could take months. You lose your experienced officer in a faraway colony. Okay, you can't replace them overnight with Amazon, right? It's not going to happen. And so now, here you are. You lost your top dog. Okay? Again, as I said earlier, the British took the ground at Bunker Hill on June 17, 1775, but they paid a heavy price for it. Over 1,000 men got killed or wounded, or killed. We don't even know how many got wounded. but that includes these officers. And so what you have to understand is that at the time, the general in charge, General Thomas Gage, he only had 6,000 to 7,000. You lost 1,000 in one day? I mean, all across the British North America, there were maybe 8,000 to 10,000. You got 6,000 to 7,000 over here, and you lose 1,000. But the rest was scattered in Canada, Nova Scotia, Florida. They got these little small coastal posts. They were all scattered. These weren't backup troops waiting on the bench. They were stretched thin across the empire. So now your top officer, Major John, get chopped down. You lose 1,000 people. Nearly half of the assault force is wiped out, and about 15 to 20% of your Boston strength is hit in one battle. These weren't random part-timers. They were trained British regulars. These were professional soldiers. These were seasoned soldiers. These were British Army. They had experience at the front, and they got cut down in one day by some rebels. Okay? And see, if Britain didn't get this under control, they were going to have some headaches. And again, you need to understand, this man right here, this little black man with the eyes, they always make a look at the little eyes. Let me see if y'all can see his little eyes. Look at that. See this? Him. Him right there. That's Peter with his musket. See? Like he hiding. You see he got the gun in his hand right here, right? And he shot him over here. Okay? You see that? Boom. Got him in the chest. All right. Now, the thing is, why was this such a big L? This particular L had the British leadership shook because of who they were fighting. The American force at Bunker Hill, these was not a polished group of people. These were dusty farmers and blacksmiths and dock workers. These were shopkeepers. This is a dude that works at Walmart. Okay? These are young apprentices. These people, look, these are not them. You understand? War was a profession. The military soldier, being a soldier, was a profession. These were not professionals by any means. Okay? These British soldiers had trained for years. I mean, think about that. The idea that you could have these dusty colonial militias go toe-to-toe with professional soldiers, it sounded unrealistic. On paper, it's lopsided. But at Bunker Hill, the so-called dusty farmers and laborers held their ground and fired with discipline and inflicted devastating casualties. And Major John fell over along with 1,000 British troops. And that shattered those assumptions that they had. That shock wasn't just tactical. I mean, think about this. It's like the Navy SEALs and the Army Rangers getting beat by a Boy Scout troop in a full-on fight. You understand me? And see, this is why this moment mattered. It wasn't just one musket shot echoing through the smoke. It disrupted the command during a critical attack. It hit British morale. It boosted colonial confidence. And it came from a man who had been enslaved only months earlier. And Peter Salem's action, the hero of Bunker Hill, it wasn't symbolic. It was lethal. It happened in the middle of an assault with smoke and dust and chaos everywhere. Whether he clearly saw Major John Pitcomb or just simply he was just ready and steady and he shot somebody in front of him. He did it, and he did it under pressure. Okay, he shot a key British commander at one of the first major battles. This war had just got started. So we as foundational Black Americans, we were not bystanders. FBA men like Peter Salem had real decisive impact. See, this white fella earlier said, well, you know, it's just majority European. Remember when he said that? It was majority European who died. Yeah, but the thing is, man, the effectiveness of foundational Black Americans, men as soldiers, this is something that can't be overlooked. See, we're not talking about ceremonial heroism here. We're not talking about people standing on the sidelines. We talk about he was close enough to do what he had to do, and he did it. You understand? Again, when he killed that man, news spread instantly. It wasn't a small problem. It slowed down operations. It forced officers to make split-second decisions without guidance. Okay, it created confusion amongst the soldiers, and and who depended on clear leadership to move and regroup. Now, after Bunker Hill, Peter Salem continued to serve for nearly 5 years. He re-enlisted multiple times. That was his thing. And fighting other major engagements such as the Harlem Heights and the Saratoga and Mammoth and Stony Point. And when the war ended, he was a free man physically and legally. But like many veterans, especially black veterans, he didn't prosper. He worked as a cane weaver, struggled financially. He died in Framingham in the poorhouse in 1860. But that doesn't take away from what he did. You understand what I'm saying? That had a lot to do with the conditions. In any other place, he would be a hero. Now, I got one more I want y'all to talk. I want to talk to you guys about one more, and then we're going to get y'all up out of here. I got a little more things to say. I'm going to read the super chats. But I wanted to talk about a gentleman by the name of Armistead Lafayette. He was a double spy. He was a spy. Okay, he was born sometime in 1748, and he died around 1830. He was an enslaved black man in Virginia during the Revolution. In 1781, when the war had shifted to the South and the British General Charles Cornwallis was moving troops through Virginia, James Armistead Lafayette, he did something incredibly dangerous and important. He was allowed to be his enslaver. He was allowed by his enslaver to help the American cause. And instead of fighting with a musket, he gathered intelligence. He pretended to be a runaway slave looking for work with the British. And at the time, the British officers often accepted enslaved men who claimed they had escaped from, their rebel masters, the American masters. So where some were used as laborers, some carried messages, some moved between camps. James used the opportunity to get close to the British officers. He was a double agent. I mean, can you imagine how cunning you have to be a double agent, right? This is someone who pretends to work for one side while secretly working for the other. The British believed James was spying for them, but he was actually reporting to the Americans. He gained the trust of the British General Benedict Arnold, who had switched from the American side to the British, so he double-crossed Benedict Arnold. Isn't that cold-blooded? That was smooth. They don't talk about that, all right? And later he got the trust of General Cornwallis. Because they trusted him, he was allowed to travel between the camps and observe the troop movements. He listened to the military conversations and he carried written messages. And since they believed he was loyal to them, they didn't suspect he was secretly helping the Americans. He reported directly to George Washington. And, he passed critical information to the American forces. He reported where the British troops were moving, how many soldiers they had, and Cornwallis's plans for Virginia, and where the British defenses were weak at. And at the same time, he gave false information to the British about the Americans. So he was lying to them, right? And that helped mislead Cornwallis and gave Americans the advantage. What he did was extremely risky. He didn't have to do any of that. Now, if he had been discovered, not only would they have executed him, they would have executed him twice. You understand me? And so here's where it got crucial. At the siege of Yorktown, which took place on September 28th to October 19th, 1781, in Yorktown, Virginia, he became one of the most important. It became one of the most important events in the entire Revolutionary War. So Cornwallis had moved his army there, hoping that the British Navy would support or either evacuate him. Instead, the American forces under George Washington, they marched south from New York, and the French forces under General Ramshaw, I hope I didn't butcher that name, they joined them. More importantly, the French Navy defeated the British fleet at the Battle of Chesapeake Bay on September 5th, 1781. And because of that defeat, Cornwallis, they couldn't escape by sea. So the American and the French army surrounded Yorktown by land, and James Armistead's intelligence helped them understand the British positions and weaknesses. So in other words, he said, man, if you pull up on them right now, you can get at them. Just pull up right now. And you can get at them. This is where they're going to be. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to do that. You see? So what ended up happening? Cornwallis ended up surrendering 8,000 British troops. That wasn't a small victory. That was all of them. That was all that they had at the time. Okay? They couldn't go back and reload. Okay? Now, the war didn't officially end until the Treaty of Paris in 1781, but they lost their entire army because of a black man. You understand me? They lost their entire army because of a black man, okay, named James Amistad Lafayette. They lost. That's what he did. That's how crucial he was. Okay, see, those white men didn't think a black man could pull a fast one on him. He was a slave. They thought they were more intelligent. It turns out he was more intelligent than they were. You understand what I'm saying? Play the fool to catch a fool. That's what they say. But anyway, James's work, it mattered because the wars are not won by strength alone. It won by strategy. And if Washington and the French commanders had not known where Cornwallis was positioning and how many troops he had waiting to get picked up, or whether reinforcements were coming, they would have hesitated, and it cost a mistake. So it was James Amistad. He helped make he helped make sure that they had accurate information, good intelligence, and it saved lives, and it prevented ambushes, and it sped up decisions, and it made it possible to trap the enemy. So because Cornwallis was surrounded and cut off at Yorktown, that's how it became possible. And this is why historians say James Amistad helped make a decisive victory in the Revolutionary War. Even after risking his life for the American cause, James remained illegally enslaved. But Virginia law, and see, here's the thing, Virginia law only granted freedom automatically to soldiers, not spies. But with the support of a man named Marquis de Lafayette, he petitioned a Virginia legislator, and in 1787, he finally granted his freedom. And out of gratitude, James changed his last name to Lafayette, and he lived as a free man in Virginia until his death around 1830. James Amistad took the name Lafayette to honor Gilbert de Monteya de Marquis de Lafayette. That was the French general who fought alongside the American army and supported James's freedom claim. And Lafayette was one of the most publicly honored foreign allies in the U.S. history, with there's many towns. There's a town in Louisiana named after him. But again, this is who we are, okay? You understand? I mean, we're talking about a black man whose actions and heroism helped win the war, okay? That person should be part of the American story, right? It shouldn't be hidden in the footnotes. A double spy example is powerful because it shows how someone could be just so brilliant and play a crucial role in 1781 and still have to fight for recognition and freedom afterwards. Okay? Again, he gained his freedom in 1787, but my God. Now, the last person I want to talk about is a gentleman named Mr. Wimple. Okay? His name is Prince Wimple. Prince Wimple, born in 1750 in West Africa. He was captured and stolen and sold as a child and brought across the Atlantic and sold in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He was purchased by William Wimple, a merchant, who later became a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Right, in the Revolutionary War, Prince Wimple, a household like many enslaved homes, he served alongside his enslaver when the fighting began. And during the Revolutionary period, Prince Wimple accompanied William Wimple in military service. He's widely associated with the famous 1851 painting. Let me see if I can pull this painting up for you. I want y'all to see this if I can pull it up. I'll see if I can. Now, I don't know if this is a full photograph. You guys just bear with me for a minute. I'll try to pull this photograph up. There's a picture of this black man on a boat. And this is why this is important, because this is when Washington crossed the Delaware. Let me see if I can put a good picture up of it for you guys. You guys still with me? I'll see, hopefully. I'm going to try to see if I can make this. Now, and this is Amazon. This is the best I can do. All right, so somewhere in there is supposed to be Prince Whipple. Okay, now it don't look like no black people that I've ever seen, but I'm gonna see if I can get a better picture of it. Okay, but bottom line is this is where this black man was on this boat with George Washington when he crossed the Delaware River. Let me see if I can get a better picture of it for you guys. Okay. That's the whole point of this thing. He was on the boat with George Washington. We got a couple of pictures here. It's hard to make out some of these pictures, and they purposely try to hide some of the images and whitewash the images. But what I'll do is I'll try to put a picture up on my community tab. But the bottom line is he's widely associated with a famous 1851 painting of Washington crossing the Delaware by Emile Lutz. And basically it shows a black man rowing, okay? It shows a black man rowing a boat, and that's him over there to the far left. That's the black man rowing the boat. That is Prince Whipple. And while historians debate whether the figure is definitively Prince Whipple, people say many traditions identify him as the man in the image. And if so, that places him at one of the most iconic, a black man, at one of the most iconic moments in the Revolution. Crossing of the Delaware River is considered iconic because it saved the American Revolution at the time when it was ready to collapse. We're talking about December 1776. The Continental Army under the Americans had suffered a bunch of defeats. The British forces had pushed Washington out of New York, ran him up out of New York. The morale was low. You had people deserting. The year was almost over. People only required to, stay for a year. You had black folk many of the black folks re-enlisted over and over again, but they were only required to be in there for a year. It was cold. They weren't getting any money. They were underpaid. They were poorly supplied. The personnel was shrinking. Okay. Nothing had changed except the rebellion was falling apart. And so here we are on Christmas Day, December 25th or 26th, 1776, in a blizzard, a snowstorm. George Washington decides it's a good idea to cross the Delaware River. All right? The river was filled with floating ice, and men had to move artillery and horses and supplies in the dark across the river. This is what this man had these people doing. They were tired. They were exhausted, but they had to go catch the Hessian army. They had to try to attack this army that was, they had to cut them off. Okay? Now they end up getting over there, and they won, and it boosted the morale of the Continental Army, so it was revitalized. And so this image of men standing together in this fragile boat, pushing through the ice in a snowstorm, it signifies black Americans were present at the creation of the nation, not only on the sidelines, not as spectators, but in the middle of the action. And this is one of the most crucial points in the Revolutionary War. And so Prince Whipple was there, rowing, freezing, risking his life in the storm. And then an image of Americans beginning And so what this should do is it help you see how America's beginning is far more complex than these traditional narratives suggest. It means that the founding moment included people who were denied full rights even as they helped secure independence. Now, on a deeper level, it highlights a contradiction. A black man was helping secure liberty in the country where many black people were enslaved, and that tension sits at the heart of the American history. That revolution declared that all men are created equal, yet equality was not applied equally. So Whipple's presence signifies both participation and a paradox, and contribution and exclusion happening all at the same time. Okay? Now, Whipple eventually gained his freedom, and in 1779 he was listed among the free black people who signed a petition to the New Hampshire legislature demanding the end of slavery. And that petition is important because it shows that Prince was not just a participant in the war, but also in the early fight for civil rights. He married Dinah Whipple, and he became part of the Portsmouth small but active free black community. He worked as a laborer. He lived the rest of his life in New Hampshire. All right, the man died at 46 years old in 1796, and he doesn't have a massive national monument. He's recognized in local New Hampshire history and in discussions about black participation in the Revolution. His life reflects the complexity of the founding era. Born free in Africa, enslaved in America, present during the fight for independence, and later advocating for liberty in his own state. You understand me? So we were there. Somebody type "we were there" in the chat room. We were here. All right. Now, I'm going to take the opportunity. I got a couple more things to say, and then we're going to let you guys out of here for the evening. I want to take the time to really thank everybody who contributed to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. As I say all the time, if you don't learn, I shouldn't earn, or should I say in the inverse, if you do learn something, I should earn. And I want to thank the 21 people who have contributed to the Super Chat. Thank you guys so much. I'm glad at least 21 people have learned. Now, some of you all may have learned something. And now would be the time to signify that you have learned something. Right now would be the opportune time to go ahead and signify that you learned something. Now, the Cash App is rolling across the bottom of the screen. And I want to thank the people who contributed to the Cash App and the rest of you who are typing right now. Let's go ahead. If you earned something, don't give me nothing if you didn't earn anything. I don't want nothing. Okay, but I'm just saying, because we had a lot of Africans, right? They don't think we belong here. And I've just given you each and every one of you all enough ammunition that you can go ahead and fight back. You can say, no, not only do we belong here, we helped found what is here. Shout out to Iris Taylor. Thank you for the gift, my love. Miss Nancy, she said, appreciate the topics. Thank you so much. Turner said, Akata go home. Ida Cherry, thank you for the info. Patricia Hightower, hey, Patricia, thank you so much. And also Keith Anderson, podcast, appreciate your family. So shout out to everybody who contributed to the Cash App. I'm going to take the opportunity to read these Super Chats again. I want to thank everybody who's contributed. Did you all learn something today? Did you pick up some good stuff? If you did, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Big shout out to B Hunter, the Spot. Thank you for the 99-cent super sticker. Also, Council 4560. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Selma Haywood 2728. Thanks for being an awesome teacher. I'm learning a lot. That's excellent. I'm proud of you. Because I thank you so much, baby. You make me feel good. Because sometimes I don't think I'm teaching people well enough. I don't know if they responding or not, but I hope you all are taking this information and using it in your daily lives and going and trolling people's channels too, the ones that don't know what they're talking about. But thank you so much, Miss Selma. I appreciate you. And also my man, Big Money Dan Taylor. Thank you, 9982 for the $199.99. This broadcast is dedicated to you, Dan. You the man, Dan. Good looking out. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. Also, Miss Yaya's Kids, These hands are for you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Yaya's kids. Always good to see you here. Curly Lock, shalom, y'all at Dennis Spurling chat. Good looking out. Who else we got in here? Thank you for educating, showing support. You guys like this? Because sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes I do things that I like to do, and they may not be things that you all like to do. I used to do a lot of military stuff. All my guys that have been here for years, I used to like to do a lot of military history. And so for the guys who've been here for a long time, they know this is nothing new. This is kind of my forte. I like talking about it because it really helps shows how America was truly founded and why. You got skin in the game, and that's what separates foundational Black Americans from everybody else. Anybody can show up and pay taxes, okay? But when you have ancestors who actually have blood in the soil, who fought and define what this country ethos and freedom is, everybody else is just living in what you created. So, we did the work and other folks showed up. Shout out to CD Snap. He said, thank you for educating, showing support, good looking out. Also, Dan Taylor, again, Bro Spurling, putting that law degree to great uses tonight. Long-time viewer, catching up with my tuition. Good looking out, Dan. Dan is the man. All right. Thank you so much. What? G30, keep teaching. I will. Man, I will keep doing it. All right, we have 25 super chats. We are moving on up. People are learning. Point 0. Thanks for exposing much of what wasn't taught to us in school. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. Somebody type FBA in the chat room. Isn't our history glorious? Isn't it great? Don't we have a wonderful, rich history? All you got to do is just start peeling back the layers, right? They know. It's time for you to know. They know, and you know who I'm talking about. They know your history better than you do. They know your history better than you do. Let me say that again. They know your history better than you do. They know your history better than you do, and that's unfortunate. But that's why I'm here, and as long as I can keep helping in that effort, I will. Shout out to DTYN, DTYW9. Thank you for the super sticker. Also, Uncle D, I love your lectures. At times you tickle me, so the best part is when you really hit that nerve and some of those 4-letter words slip. I know. I'm doing the best I can, baby. I'm trying to stop cussing. I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best that I can. Now, some of you all might notice a little tint around my face. I was hanging around in the pool, this sunscreen, okay, because I got to protect my good looks. And so my face is a little white around it. Like, what does Uncle D look like? He was bathing in baby powder out there. Yeah, that's what the little white tint is around my face. Can you see that? Got the little sunscreen, or that PS93 or whatever that is, man. And my wife makes me put it on my face, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to get skin cancer, nothing like that, but I don't know. I don't know what it's about, but this is something that she think I'm supposed to have. I'm like, well, I ain't never had a problem before, but I just do what she say for the most part because it's about health. She got me on a diet. I lost 6 pounds. Happy about that. But anyway, I just let her keep doing what she do. Jolana Taburn, thank you much for the $1, baby. I appreciate you. NT Claus, thank you for the $2. Thank you so much. Also, Mark Freelancer. Shout out to Wentworth the Mule, Phyllis John, Cornelius Samuel. Man, look at these names, right? I love it. It's Wentworth, the Mule, Phyllis John, Cornelius Samuel, Barzidia, and Pompey, and more. Our FBA founder. You know what's cool, brother? All of these people knew each other. Because the Boston community was so small, all of these great foundational Black Americans knew each other. I wished I could see them in a room with Phyllis Wheatley and just hear some of the conversations that these people had. They all knew each other. All Black people know each other, right? We all know it, and that's just amazing that they all know each other, and now we're going to have thousands of people who are remembering their names. Our ancestors will say they remember us. And that's one of the greatest things you can do for your ancestors is remember them, right? We remember them. I keep my mother, my grandmother, and my daddy right behind me over here, right? And sometimes you'll see I'll burn a candle in remembrance of them, you see? Because I know when I speak their names, then they come back to us. You understand? Again, we are still a people of African descent. We're just not African. You understand? And so we still have that heritage. Okay? I'm not of any confusion. I'm talking about nationality. I'm not talking about historical homelands at this point. Our nationality is American. Okay? Our ethnicity is what it is. We're an amalgamation of people, but we are people of African descent. And we don't get, the things that make us great are the fact that we're African. That's why we fast jumping, high running, rhythm having. We're beautiful people. God created us, literally. What the white man made for bad, God made for good. We're the most dynamic people on this planet as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think there's many who could disagree. I don't think so at all. But yeah, man, all that, it's just shout out to the ancestors, man. Intricately tangled, always learning, and enjoyed your British accent. Well, I do from time to time. We'll tarry here and there and commence to possibly speaking the old English language. So I thank you certainly for your opportunity and your praise, good lady. How we should continue forth with the broadcast at this point. But then shout out to Intricately Tangled. The Craft Geek, bringing history to life, FBA style. Yes, I am, man. I'm enjoying it. It's complicated stuff, too. This is like trying to teach math. It's hard to make it interesting, but I do the best I can by personalizing the stories and really digging deep, like learning about the man and how he was given away, abandoned at 5 years old, and he became such a dynamic preacher. George Washington knew his name. That's amazing. C.J. Marsh, Freedom, and that's the story for everybody. Some of you all who came up hard, sometimes it's the hard luck stories that turn out being just amazing people, man. So don't count yourself out. You got a great destiny ahead of you. I had a hard luck story too coming up, I talk about it in my books oftentimes, but it's made me who I am. It's made me the dynamic person that I am. Sometimes the easy life, it doesn't. You don't have to work as hard. But when you come up fighting and scratching, some of you all out there came up fighting and scratching, and you just passed up everybody that grew up with a silver spoon in their mouth, right? So shout out to all the hard luck cases. But anyway, C.J. Marsh, Freedom Ain't Free. Thank you so much, brother. Always good to have you. 562 Canary, FBA are a force to be reckoned with. Yes, we are. And also Uranus. Thank you for the $2 super sticker. Sigma Ragel, FBAs have consistently saved this country in every war this country has been in, and we are positioned yet again to save the country again. I think we're gonna rest. I think we're gonna rest on this one. I'm just saying. But either way, let's see here. Who else we got? Hard hitting history, dropping some coin in the collection plate. Good looking out. Who am I? Boy, Uranus. Yeah, thank you for the $100. I appreciate you. Oh my God, you guys are hilarious. So funny. Anyway, Thomas Dolores, my man Uranus came through with the 100 bones. Yeah, baby. Yeah, you can keep saying that. I'll say all them little words. Yeah, you put $100 on, I'm gonna say all your little cuss words. I'm gonna make an exception. Anyway, Tommy Dolores, thank you so much, baby, for the super sticker and the $4.99. And who else we got? Wanda Rogers. SM56. What is it? SM. 5 years for the super sticker. Appreciate you so much. You are amazing. Thank all of you. I appreciate you guys. Now we're gonna go ahead and get this thing wrapped up. Oh my God, hold on a minute. The first 20 Africans arrived at Jamestown in 1619. People of African ancestry were already shaping what would become the American Southwest. The earliest black settlers in the western United States were Spanish speakers who came north from what is now Mexico. Their story begins in 1519, when Africans, free and enslaved, were among the Spanish forces that overthrew the Aztec Empire and established colonial New Spain. In the centuries that followed, New Spain imported nearly 500,000 enslaved Africans, more than were brought to mainland British North America. These men and women came from the Upper Guinea coast, the Ashanti Empire, Yoruba and Igbo regions of present-day Nigeria, and Central African kingdoms like Congo and Angola. Unlike in the British colonies, Africans in New Spain did not remain a separate caste. Over time, most intermarried with Spaniards and the much larger indigenous population, creating a racially mixed society. By 1742, Colonial records show that people of African descent, mulattoes, outnumbered mestizos, and together they formed a major part of the population, second only to indigenous peoples. This history matters because Black presence in America didn't begin in chains on the Atlantic coast. It began earlier in Spanish-speaking lands, shaping the Southwest generations before Jamestown ever existed.
Man, that Baby D, boy, that Baby D just come take over like that. He need to be in bed. Shout out to Baby D. You guys want to see more of some Baby D? Who wants to sponsor Baby D? If you guys want to sponsor Baby D, I want you guys to let me know. If you want to sponsor Baby D, let me know what you want me to do with Baby D. Baby D is a new invention. Okay, it is literally, I can't even explain to you all how we created Baby D. But Baby D, if y'all want to see more of Baby D, y'all let me know. Okay, if you want to see more of Baby D talking, he got a bedtime. He's supposed to be in the bed by 7:45. He's supposed to be brushing his teeth. Okay, by 7, all 4 of his teeth are supposed to be brushed. Okay, no later than 7:35, and he's supposed to be in his bed, but he is not in his bed. Baby D likes to hang out too late. Okay, with the grown-ups. You ever had one of them kids who won't stay with the grown-ups, just won't stay in their little room? They keep cracking the door. Can I have some water? I want some water. I want to listen to your conversation. That's Baby D. Okay. I gotta go to the bathroom. You just went to the bathroom. Baby D. Go get back in the bed now. Don't make me come in there. Don't make me come in there. Somebody say they want to see Baby D rap. Baby D don't rap. Baby D is not rapping. We is a privileged child. Okay. But yeah, I'm thirsty. I can't sleep. Read me a bedtime story. Especially when you have friends over. That's when they really want to come over. You got friends over, you trying to chill and smoke your little reefer and drink your little drink and then playing your little music, and then Baby D keep coming out the bathroom, coming out the room talking about, Mama, I'm tired. You know what I was, Baby D. That was me. I was bad. I wanted to see what was going on. Anyway, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up, baby. So anyway, all these black men that we discussed, and black women, because we talked about Sister Phyllis Wheatley, Peter Salem and Salem Poor and Cuff Whitmore, the men who stood up at Lexington and Concord in 1775 and who held the line at Bunker Hill, June 1775, they were real, okay? They were real. They loaded muskets. They packed powder. They stood in the smoke so thick they could barely see 10 feet ahead of them. They faced the British Army's bayonets. They did what they had to do. They advanced the country. But when you look at the paintings, when you hear the history, you don't see any of this. Is some of you all's first time hearing anything about these people, right? Isn't this the first time? Let's just be honest with ourselves. If this is the first time that you've heard these stories about these men, type B1 in the chat room. If this is the first time that you've heard any of these stories about any of these founding fathers, any of these founding foundational black American fathers and mothers, type B1 in the chat room. If this is your first time hearing it, it's first time I heard it, type it in the chat room. First time, okay? Yeah, I know it is. And I got some people who've been here for a minute. It's your first time here. I've heard the stories before. I never put it together, but I've heard the stories before. But look at this. Look at all these people. It's your first. What if they taught this real history? What if this was present in the paintings? Because you don't see them. Okay? And when you do see a black face, someone quickly says, "Oh, he must have been a slave." And if that was the only role available, right? That's what they make you think. That's the only role available that we had as slaves, right? And as if free black men and women didn't exist, as if landowners like Pompey Peters didn't exist, as if militia members like Cuff Whitmore didn't exist, as if trained fighters like Salem Poor, publicly praised by white officers at Bunker Hill, didn't exist. And see, this is where art stops being decoration and starts being propaganda and narrative control. Now look at John Trumbull, this white man who painted the death of General Warren at the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1817, 42 years after the battle. Trumbull wasn't guessing who he was a Continental Army veteran. He knew George Washington. He moves in the circles of the founders. His paintings help define how Americans visually remember the Revolution. And in that 1817 painting, he created in a country where slavery was expanded after the transatlantic slave trade was banned. He placed a black soldier near the center of the action. For more than a century, Americans were told that that figure was Peter Salem. And that was correct. And there he stands, near the fallen General Joseph Warren, besides the white officers, Thomas Grosvenor, in the heart of the founding drama. Black and white soldiers fighting side by side. Imagine how powerful that is if that was a thing you looked at in the cover of your textbook in history class. So you telling me before the Civil War, this is black people fighting almost 100 years beforehand? So we were here. It would be no question that we were foundational black Americans. But see, then in the 1980s, just like they're doing now, scholars begin to question whether this figure was truly Peter Salem. They begin to remove these black faces from these books. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was just symbolic. Maybe it was different. Right? Notice the pattern. For over 150 years, Peter Salem stood in that painting as the named hero of Bunker Hill. Then suddenly, uncertainty enters the chat. And see, this isn't a conspiracy. It's a narrative. It's what happened. History isn't just about what happened. It's about who gets named clearly, who becomes a footnote. Because here's what we know beyond debate. Salem Peter's valor at Bunker Hill was formally recognized in petitions signed by white officers. Cuff Whitmore stood in the ranks of Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill. Pompey Peters, born enslaved around 1746, fought in the Revolution and later owned land in what is now Maine, died around 1837. James Amistad Lafayette, born between 1748 and 1760, acted as a double spy in 1781, helping trap General Cornwallis at Yorktown, contributing to the surrender of 8,000 British troops. Colonel Tye escaped in the late 1775 and led the Black Brigade in New Jersey and conducted organized raids on behalf of the British and terrified the Americans. And see, these aren't symbolic characters. These are men with dates and locations and battlefields and property deeds and military units and intelligence networks. And yet, when America paints its founding story, they fade. And when we look at revolutionary art, we see polished white faces and powdered wigs and neatly pressed uniforms. We don't see the smoke-filled reality of an integrated battlefield. We don't see black men who are already embedded in the militia system long before Executive Order 9981 in 1948. See, we don't see the formerly enslaved black men who transitioned from bondage to the battlefield. We don't see the land-holding black veterans stabilizing the frontier territory in 1780s and the 1790s. Art reflects era. You see? So when Black Soldiers appears in the center of one of the most famous Revolutionary War paintings ever made, that's not small. And when his identity later becomes fragile or disappears, that's not small either. Because, see, this debate isn't really about brushstrokes. It's about permanence, or should I say permanence. If Peter Salem stood at Bunker Hill in 1777 and steady under fire and possibly fired the shot that dropped Major John Pitcairn, then why does his recognition feel negotiable? Why does his visibility need defending? Why does every black figure in the founding story seem to require extra proof, extra documentation, extra validation, while white participation is assumed? That's the quiet tragedy of whitewashing. It doesn't require burning documents. It just requires selective framing. Remove 10 to 15% of the population from the visual record, like Boston's black residents in 1773, and within 2 generations, people begin to believe they were never there. They believe we were never there. And when people believe that we were never there, they start believing that we never contributed. And when they believe that we never contributed, they start believing we don't belong here. And that's how memories shift. See, these black people, these black founding fathers and mothers, they were shaping America. And the tragedy isn't that they weren't present. The tragedy is that their presence feels optional in this story. History is not just about what happened. It's about who remains visible when the paint dries. And when you widen the frame, when you put the names, dates, and deeds and battlefields back in, the myth collapses. They were there. We were there. We fought. We built. We strategized. We bled. And no painting, no debate, no convenient whitewash narrative is going to erase that. Now, this leads to an uncomfortable truth. There are white Americans, not all, but there's enough, who genuinely believe that we aren't foundational to this country. And when I say foundation, I'm talking about the foundational black Americans, the American Negro, the freedmen. That's what I'm talking about. They talk as if we're recent. They talk as if we're guests. They frame us as demographic change instead of historic constant. And that misunderstanding isn't accidental. It's fed by centuries of selective storytelling and curative imagery and narrative control. And that's what fuels this white nationalist movement. That's what fuels this idea that America was a white country. Did you hear all those black people? Does this sound like America was in any way a white country? Because see, if you convince yourself that America was founded exclusively for white people, then you can convince yourself it was intended to remain exclusively for white people. And that's how this whole white ethno-state fantasy survives. It depends on historical amnesia. It depends on edited paintings. It depends on textbooks that reduce black presence to slavery alone, while erasing black participation in governance, warfare, commerce, theology, and civil life. Did you not hear when I told you that between 40 to 60% of the black men who were eligible to enroll or join the military in the Revolutionary War did that? That would be the equivalent of approximately I would say 10 million black men joining the military right now to go fight in Iran. That's phenomenal. I mean, based on everything laid out here, the names, the records, the militia rolls, the petitions, the land deeds, the sermons, the spy networks, the battlefields, their claim collapses. You understand? The truth is, family, they're trying to make the revolution and the founding of this country be the exclusive property of one group. That visual erasure reinforces a subtle but powerful message. This country was founded by white people alone and therefore belongs to white people. And that's just not the truth. But that message supports the logic of white supremacy. It makes racial hierarchy appear natural and historical rather than constructed and enforced. But here's the thing. When we look at the founding of this country, black people were part of every economy, the labor force, the households, the the maritime culture. We helped sustain this country. You understand? See, the historical reality is more complex. The economy was interconnected. The war effort was integrated and practiced long before policy caught up. The founding unfolded in a society that already included Black Americans as workers, residents, soldiers, messengers, landowners, thinkers, shaping the moral argument of liberty itself. America was never a white ethno state. It was never racially pure. It was never racially exclusive. In fact, only in myth does that exist. And when you strip away that myth, what remains is an undeniable truth. Foundational Black Americans were present at the beginning, participated in the struggle, and helped shape the outcome. And you can't erase that with a painting. You can't erase it with a slogan. You can't build a serious argument for racial exclusivity on a foundation that was never exclusive to begin with. Now, let me say this plainly. I understand why many of you African immigrants don't think we as foundational Black Americans were here at the founding of this country, because we don't talk about it enough. We spend our time talking about which YouTuber is having relationships with that person. This is what we talk. We talk about the different artists and rappers, you know, that sing songs, who the baby daddy belongs to, whatever. We don't center our history enough, and we don't defend it. And so if the only story people hear about foundational Black American life is slavery beginning in 1619 and civil rights in the 1960s, then of course they'll assume we were just along for the ride. If the paintings and the movies and the books don't show us, if the textbooks reduce us, if the documentaries crop us out, if the founding narrative is visually whitewashed, then people who arrived later, who just got here, will naturally misunderstand who we are. But misunderstandings is not the same thing as truth. And here's the truth. Before the Constitution, we were here. Before the White House, we were here. Before there was a standing army, we were here. At Lexington in 1775, we were here. At Bunker Hill on June 17, 1775, we were here. At Yorktown from September 28th to October 19, 1781, we were here. We were here in the form of Peter Salem, hero of Bunker Hill, Salem Poor, Cuff Whitmore, Pompey Peters, James Armistead Lafayette, Colonel Ty, Phyllis Wheatley. These aren't myths. These are not diversity hires. These are the names tied to the battlefields, the intelligence networks, the land deeds, and the military roles. So when someone who immigrated under these modern immigration laws question whether we as foundational Black Americans belong, that's not a historical analysis. That is their projection. We didn't immigrate here. We're not processed, and look, we weren't processed through Ellis Island. We're not naturalized through some policy reform. We didn't come up here on TPS and stay. We're not anchor babies. We were forged here, and that matters. And here's where clarity becomes necessary. See, Nigeria, that term, that phrase was coined by a white woman in 1897 by Flora Shaw. Okay? That's the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885. That carved Africa into colonial territories. Okay? In 1914, Britain merged the northern and southern protectorates to create Nigeria. forcing the Hausa and the Fulani and the Yoruba and the Igbo and others into these artificial borders. Those are your historical facts. But here's the difference. Those nations just came about. We have been Americans longer than Nigeria has been in existence. Let me run that back to you again. When you start asking us where we from, we can point to the fact that we've been here since the founding of this country, and it predates your countries, all of them. Because see, before that, Africa was just a big slab of land with a bunch of tribes roving around in random kingdoms. You understand me? Those nations were politically consolidated by colonial decisions. We were ethnically formed through 400 years of shared bondage, shared resistance, shared culture, and building and shared survival on American soil. We've been here. This is where our ethnogenesis is. You all have been forced into territorial boundaries by European powers. See, we're not Yoruba-Americans. We're not Igbo-Americans. We're not Fulani-Americans. We're not immigrants maintaining tribal identity abroad. We are a distinct American ethnic group formed under a specific historical process that can't be replicated by migration. That distinction is not hatred, it's definition. And definition is not division, it's clarity. Now about this word, Akata. If the insult is meant to suggest rootlessness, homelessness, or disconnection from land, it fails immediately. Because see, our foundational roots as foundational Black Americans are here. Our lineage as foundational Black Americans is here. Our cemeteries filled with our loved ones as foundational Black Americans are here. The battlefields that our brave soldiers died upon are here. Our churches that we prayed in as foundational Black Americans are here. Our labor built the infrastructure of this nation. America is not a temporary stop for us on our way back home or to London. It's the only homeland we have ever known. So when someone suggests we're recent, foreign, or deportable, they're revealing their misunderstanding, not our instability. We do not deny that Africa is the ancestral continent, but ancestral origin and national identity are not the same thing. Italy is the ancestral land for many Americans. So is Ireland. It's the ancestral land for many Americans. Germany is ancestral for many Americans. Yet no one questions whether Irish Americans belong in America because they have Irish roots. Our rupture was violent. Our transformation was forced. But what emerged was real. We became foundational Black Americans. And here's the final truth. When people say, we are all one, it often appears when access is needed. When you want to tether yourself to something that we're able to produce and secure for ourselves. Access to civil rights protections, access to political capital built through foundational Black American struggle, access to economic opportunity carved out through American law that we fought for. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with legal immigration. There's nothing wrong with honest success. There's nothing wrong with cultural pride. But there is something wrong with rewriting history to erase the people who laid the groundwork. We didn't leave Africa. Africa was forcibly severed from us through enslavement. And in that rupture, something new was born. Not symbolic, not borrowed, not imported, built through war. Built through Reconstruction, built through Jim Crow survival, built through civil rights struggle, built through continuous contribution to American political and cultural life. Without doubt, we are foundational Black Americans. We're not adjunct. We're not accessory. We're not a demographic trend. We are foundational. Foundation is not something you argue into existence. It's something everything else rests upon. It's not a painting. It's not a slogan. It's not an insult. It's not a narrative drift. It's not projection. You can undo that structure. We're not recent. We're not guests. We're not confused about where we belong. We're home. And see, the thing is, foundation does not ask permission to exist. And we are that. This is Uncle D, and as I always said this time, I'm out.
In the Spurling podcast. Hit the like button, subscribe.